Hi, everyone. Good to see you back. We'll wait just 30 more seconds, time for the Zoom to let everybody in. And then we get started. It's also good to see who's on time. Okay, so I suppose like yesterday, people will be 5 minutes late, but I suggest we get started. So welcome back, everyone. It's good to see so many of you in the room. Before I turn the floor over to our keynote speakers for some fireworks, I wanted to take just a minute to step back and reflect on what we've heard yesterday. We started the day with Susan Athey, the chief economist at the DOJ. She made the point that going to court with machine learning-based evidence is a great litigation strategy, which came as a surprise to many of us. This was very refreshing. So Susan, once again, thank you so very much for that great introduction to the third annual conference. Then we've heard from Rebecca Williams and Bill Kovacic. They discussed the future of computational antitrust. They talked about the need for antitrust agencies to systematically document their past activities in order to better shape future policy. They discussed how to educate lawyers about computer science, whether in the classroom, at the university, or within competition agencies. And they concluded with some remarks on automated antitrust litigation. And then we've heard from 4 different competition agencies in the agency carousel. They presented their progress in computational antitrust, and they showed that the topic is not only academic, but also very practical. And we ended the day with a panel on AI with 4 scholars discussing the legal framework for antitrust agencies to rely more heavily on machine learning. Today, we have a great program with a keynote in just a minute, a panel discussing results achieved with computational tools, a computational carousel with 2 demos from companies, and a grande finale with 1 academic, 1 technical expert, and 2 globally recognized practitioners discussing computational antitrust. All right, on to our keynotes. So Glenn and Zoe are co-authors, and they have prepared a talk about what a whole new direction for antitrust might look like. This new direction involves computational power. That's all I know. And I'm as equally excited as you are right now. Now, here is Glenn's official bio, and then I'll give a less official bio. The official one is that he is the founder and the research director of the Microsoft Research Special Project, the Plural Technology Collaboratory. He is also the founder of Radical Exchange, and he is the founder and chair of the Polarity Institute. He is the senior advisor to the Getting Polarity Research Network at Harvard University. Now, less officially, Glenn is one, if not my favorite thinkers to get on the phone with, which I know is very specific, but let me tell you why that is. Whenever I get a chance to spend 30 minutes with Glenn on the phone, I leave the call with many great ideas for my papers, pointed comments, and not just food for thoughts, but a whole buffet of thoughts. So I'm very much looking forward to today's keynote for that precise reason. On his side is Zoe. She is a junior fellow at the Harvard Society of Fellows. Her current research focuses on privacy and transparency in markets, contracts, and other forms of communication. She received her PhD in economics from Harvard University in 2023, so congratulations. And she holds a MPhil in history and philosophy of science from the University of Cambridge. Now, maybe less officially, although this information is on our website, Zoe is also a poet. And so, of course, I had to explore that a little bit this morning. And I thought that everyone would enjoy just a second of our poetry before diving into more brutal topics. So here we go. I'll try my best. I used to envy the trees wearing mists as veils, modest trunks exploding into thousands of muscle-bound legs soon as they reach the soil. Now even trees seems docile and susceptible, which I thought was very beautiful. So on that note, to both of you, thank you so very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Thibaut. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to give the presentation. Zoe will field the questions. But this is joint work in progress, building on previous work that we did called Economic Democracy and Market Power. And it's going to be a little bit different than what Thibaut described. It's a little bit less methodologically focused in the sense of evidence gathering, and a little bit more methodologically focused in terms of how we can use computational tools to reimagine antitrust remedies and interventions. And it's inspired, despite the fact that it's, we're going to try to give a bit of a new approach, by something very old. So, going back to John Sherman, antitrust was originally an anti-monarchical project. Sherman said that if we would not endure a king as a political power, we should not endure a king over the production of the transport, production, or sale of any of the necessities of life. And, there have been different approaches. There were, at the inception, different approaches to how to counter monarchy in this way. The one that's been most, discussed and popular recently is kind of the populist approach, associated with people like Williams Jennings Bryan and Louis Brandeis, that really focused on this Jeffersonian tradition of avoiding and breaking up concentrations of power. A second approach that's associated with kind of the progressives, people like Teddy Roosevelt, and the progressive intellectuals, was one of using democratic political power to sort of co-opt and control these concentrations of private power. Sometimes they used breakups, but the real goal was to achieve regulation, maybe even nationalization, to subordinate those concentrations of private power to democratic nation states. Walter Lippmann is perhaps one of the people most associated with this, had a great influence on the New Deal. But there's a third tradition that I think is often forgotten, but equally, if not more important, associated with people like Henry George and John Dewey. And the vision there was neither, make the democratic nation state supreme nor break up power. It was instead to constitute new constellations of democratic accountability associated with the new technological possibilities opened up. This is associated with the utilities and municipalization movements, with the labor movement. It was perhaps best expressed in this wonderful book by John Dewey called The Public and Its Problems, in which he argued that new technologies create new forms of interdependence, and the principle underlying democracy is not nation states. It's really the notion that interdependence should be self-governing, that the people who are subject to the power created by new forms of interdependence should be the people who have the say on controlling the direction that interdependence evolves. And that in order, therefore, Dewey argued, for interdependence and democracy to survive, neither of the other two options are really viable, because technology creates these new forms of interdependence. Only by creating new publics, new polities that could democratically govern these can we actually have democracy, because these new forms of interdependence don't follow exactly nation-state lines. So simply subjecting them to democratic oversight in the nation-state sense does not actually achieve the substantive goals of democracy, which are that the actual interdependence is governed by the people who are subject to that interdependence. And the economics of this are actually incredibly simple, much more simple even than the Chicago school tradition. They are almost mechanically obvious. and yet they're much more radical than that tradition. In particular, monopolies, the problem is they internalize their profits. They don't internalize the surplus of their counterparties, of consumers, workers, or people who are the subject of externalities. And if there is a way, by changing the corporate governance, by changing who is in charge of the corporation and to what it is accountable, you can incorporate those unincorporated surpluses, then without having to give up the benefits of economies of scale, without having to have one nation state intervene in an international market, you could, at least in principle, constitute a new accountability structure that avoids the harms that are associated with market power. So this is an extremely, extremely simple economic idea, but very radical. It would require fundamentally rethinking the way that corporations are accountable, operate, and reimagine corporate governance as a remedy for market power. But there's huge problems in making this happen, and there really have been since Dewey's time, and ones he talked about at length. You have to identify who are these stakeholders, how do you quantify and define them? And even if you can sort of in some technocratic or objective way define them, how do they organize themselves given that they're distributed all around the world? You know, creating a polity in a country, think about like what the European Union has been trying to do, even within well-defined states that have had relationships with each other for years, trying to make themselves think of themselves as a polity, organize political parties, find people who represent them. This is an incredibly difficult thing to achieve in a distributed set of people subject to the power of a technological platform. Then these people need to find a way to communicate with each other, to reach political decisions, to come up with common understandings, to set an agenda, and eventually to make collective decisions, especially in an environment where, for a commercial product or for workers, different people will be subject to the power of these companies to different extent. How do you even quantify that? How do you get a sense of who thinks what? All these things are super challenging. And we've seen these problems play out in practice. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, there's recently been quite a lot of news about the way in which they've tried to set up a governance structure so that they're accountable to more than shareholders, so they're accountable to some notion of the common good. And I don't think all of these experiments have been entirely successful, partly because of some of these problems that we've been talking about. How one actually make something in a meaningful and responsible way accountable to something other than shareholders. But I actually think this is one area where technology has a lot to do to help. And this is what plurality is all about. Technology offers ways increasingly for people to connect across very potentially diverse physical situations and backgrounds. Potentially, this can be gated and quantified using some of the technologies that you guys have been talking about for the last couple of days. There are platforms like Polis that allow people to deliberate and reach respectful, common understandings across differences, find consensual points to move forward on in a way that traditional social media has not succeeded in doing. LLMs offer the possibility for people to do this much more quickly, much more responsively, in much more detail with much less individual attention that might have been unrealistic for them to supply in other times. There are new voting techniques that allow in a much more natural and continuous way for people with varying degrees of stake or interest in a topic to express these differing degrees of stake or interest while still having a baseline of kind of democratic equality. And these tools are not just theoretical, they're increasingly being used. They've helped transform Taiwan into the world's most successful digital democracy under the leadership of Audrey Tong, the world's first digital transgender minister, who came out of an Occupy movement that occupied their national legislature for 3 weeks, but used these tools to build consensus so that she became the first Occupy leader to become a minister in a government. And there is a large civic technology movement that's addressed problems from the pandemic to misinformation, major policy questions. And these tools are increasingly making their way back into the governance of these AI platforms through OpenAI's Democratic Inputs to AI project and Anthropic's collective writing of their constitutional AI recently. And I think that this potentially offers a really exciting alternative approach to coping with market power, rather than on breakups or allowing market power to run rampant. Instead, one can think about changing the ownership structure, harnessing some of these tools, and holding companies accountable for being up with the state of the art in terms of what's possible as a way of, as an intervention for mergers, for monopolization, et cetera. Now, there are some major limits to what antitrust is not so good at dealing with. It is focused on consumers and workers, commercial counterparties, not externalities, disinformation, biorisk, et cetera, pollution. Those have to be dealt with through other mechanisms, possibly also ways of bringing stakeholders into the process. But antitrust doesn't have the tools to directly address that. But it does, what it does have that's quite powerful is ways to directly quantify the stake that different consumer groups have. And especially with the types of computational tools that you all are talking about, this becomes highly heterogeneous, highly rich, gives us a real sense of the types of individuals who are subject to what degree of power, and therefore should be included in representation schemes that are empowered by these more flexible digital participation tools. Therefore, I think it's really exciting to imagine how antitrust, rather than just treating all companies, whether nonprofit or however organized, the same, can instead try to steer the development in a way that's consistent with the things that are already evolving, but combats the natural tendency of the markets to instead collapse everything to just a simplistic, corporate structure, and instead can, both in terms of where interventions occur and what the shape of those interventions are, consider the nature of the accountability of the organization and try to steer that accountability in directions that are already being explored by the industry in ways that create an incentive for and pressure towards inclusive, digitally empowered stakeholder governance. And this is part of a broader plurality movement that I'm involved in that was really inspired by Audrey Tong, Taiwan's digital minister. In Mandarin, in the traditional Mandarin that they use in Taiwan, the characters shown on this picture for plural and digital are the same. And so there's this tradition of developing technology to empower pluralism and participatory governance. We represent that by these overlapping squares, which are a Unicode character. And we develop everything as part of an open source participative process. Welcome all of you to join in that, become co-creators, co-authors, recognized collaborators on the project. And if that interests you, check out this QR code, which has a bunch of ways to connect to us. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn over to Zoe to answer questions and stop my sharing. Actually, I guess I'll leave it up there just in case anyone wants to see it.
All right. Thank you so much. So questions will come in the chat. I see one already. Maybe let me abuse my position of power here and start with two questions that I had. The first question is, what maybe more of a technical question and then more of an institutional question. The first one on the technical side is whether or not you see blockchain playing a role, especially in the governance of those, whether AI companies or AI system.
Sure. Thanks so much for the question. Certainly, Web3 and blockchain systems can be a valuable way of attributing stakes to a collective project. And so, insofar as those tools have developed in the blockchain and Web3 space, I think those tools are absolutely applicable. I mean, whether those are, whether those really harness the true value of blockchain as a trustless network is another question. But certainly, one of the most exciting innovations that came out of the explosion of interest in blockchain was the idea of the DAO, the idea of a cooperative social endeavor where different people have different kinds of voting rights in line with their interests. And so, insofar as those tools have been developed in that space, absolutely, they can be applied and brought into the sorts of questions that we're talking about today.
And so this actually brings my second question, which is the expertise that you would need within competition agencies, right? So I understand this is not just for competition agencies, but if they have a role to play, which kind of expertise do you think they would need to acquire in order to do it well, right? To understand what they do and they indeed enforce those remedies.
Yeah, the question of enforcement here, I think, is a huge one, and one that we're starting to think about. I think that one of the key forms of expertise, I mean, there's one level on which you might think that there's a high level of expertise required to make any of these systems enforceable or enforced. On the other hand, there are ways that we can think about in which the company itself is not the one that is running the democratic processes, and there might be a sort of third party or some kind of self-governed DAO or decentralized group that is in charge of the democratic processes, so that there's not necessarily a burden on the antitrust authorities or the competition authorities to understand what the firm is doing, but rather they can trust the group that is collectively determining their own questions because it's in that group's interest to collectively determine itself. So there are interesting questions about, the burden of enforcement, and also which groups of people who have stake in this firm have different kinds of incentives to truthfully represent how they're collectively governing.
One thing I would just add is one type of expertise that I think would be really important would be corporate governance expertise, which is not a traditional focus in antitrust authorities, as well as expertise in some of these digital tools that empower more creative forms of corporate governance. So,
yeah, thanks so much. I'll put the link to your QR code in the chat right now for everyone to just access, and I will stop sharing your screen so we can see you actually. Yes, like this. All right, perfect. So yes, all right, you're back. So not to make your life any easier, we covered technical aspect, institutional aspect, and now some maybe more substantial aspects of antitrust. One question we have in the chat is whether or not you see concrete adjustments needed in order for what you propose to fit within the antitrust framework, right? So again, not making your life any easier here.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly what the differences would have to be, but I think there's some degree to which the theoretical underpinnings, as Glenn pointed out throughout the talk, the theoretical underpinnings of the whole idea of antitrust really do naturally point to the kinds of solutions that we've been talking about. And those theoretical underpinnings, as Glenn touched on, are really fundamentally about the fact that the key problem with a monopoly is that it doesn't internalize externalities of its stakeholders. And so on a really basic level, if we look at the whole point of antitrust and what it's trying to do, what it was set up to do back in the day, it really does directly point to this idea that people, if there's an effective form of collective governance, then that is a natural remedy to the kinds of market power that monopolies and so forth can come about. Now, what that means for the actual practice and precedent and so forth, I think will defer to the lawyers.
Yeah, I would to follow up on what the practical aspects might potentially be. One is there's a long tradition of treating nonprofits differently in antitrust. This happens in hospital issues. This happens with the Major League Baseball, many different things when there's a social interest, and trying to rigorously define notions of accountability to stakeholders and then make those criteria for differing treatment, I think would be very valuable. And the second aspect would be to consider as a non-structural remedy or a quasi-structural remedy the changing of stake or the empowerment of counterparties that could have power over the firm, like labor unions.
And so when you're talking about remedies, do you have in mind this kind of remedies in the antitrust sense of the term, meaning I see a practice and I intervene only when I see a practice, or would you also envision that this could work ex ante, right? So you would intervene just based on a monopoly position without any practice in specifics?
Sorry, I don't think I understood the last piece of your question.
So I guess my point is, whether or not this will only apply ex post, meaning I spot a practice which is anti-competitive in the sense of antitrust, and then I impose what you propose as a remedy, or would it also work without any infringement of antitrust, but just, intervening on the market based on other criteria?
It's a great question. I think that, well, first I'd say that I would hope that in a world where this is initially used as an antitrust remedy, then firms that seem to be amassing large market power in order to avoid an antitrust suit would start to adopt these kinds of procedures and may even see the benefits of these forms of collective governance without any sort of remedy or need coming from an external agency.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, but I also think that, look, we're talking this is an antitrust audience. They have certain tools available to them. The things that Zoe are talking about, those are great. But what people on this call can actually probably do is impose remedies at the stage of conduct. So I think part of the message is for regulators, part of this message is for antitrust enforcers, part of this message is for people at companies trying to avoid problem with regulators. And I think it's a potential solution in all those three contexts. So
yeah. So one more question in the chats, which I think is, I like, because this is thinking outside of the box, but we always come back to this idea of a box, and here more specifically of a black box. And I guess I will turn the question a bit differently. The question is whether or not you see concerns regarding the black box of AI and the lack of transparency, or at least the ability to understand. But my question would be, if policymakers are to use AI in their remedies, the fact that indeed they cannot always, especially some policymakers with just, we have antitrust agencies with just 10 employees. So those agencies won't be in a position to fully understand the functioning of AI. And if there is a black box issue, is it a limit to what you are proposing, or is it not?
You want to take that one?
If you want me to. I think that the black box issues with AI are real challenges, but are not necessarily impediments to democratic oversight or participation, because to a large extent, the black box issues apply to anyone interacting with the system, not just to external people. Now, of course, non-disclosures of source data, there's a lot trickier issues there. But there are plenty of things that are black boxes that are democratically governed. We didn't reveal nuclear secrets, and yet we had, a democratic government determining how those nuclear weapons were going to be used. So, and as we saw with the constitutional AI for Anthropic, you can have democratic participation in writing a constitution that are instructions given to a black box algorithm. So I definitely think the black box issue is an important issue and a challenge in a lot of different ways. but I'm not sure it is particularly an impediment to the capacity to have democratic accountability, at least somewhere in the chain.
I think it's also important to recognize that a lot of the, there's a lot of rhetoric today that emphasizes the black box nature of AI. And some of that rhetoric comes from the very people who want, who have an interest in maintaining a kind of mysticism or mystery about how these systems work. And their incentive to maintain that mystery is coming from their desire to not be understood and not be regulated in the ways that we're talking about today and you've been talking about throughout the conference.
Yeah, I see that sometimes going to some conferences where, the main message is it's all complicated, which is true, but it doesn't mean that we cannot comprehend the subject. Okay, one final question. You've mentioned Taiwan, and I know, Glenn, you're going to be there very soon. What can you learn from their experience in actually successfully, doing something similar or that is actually inspiring to you into, maybe trying to transpose that into antitrust, or to put it differently, what have they done so that it lifted the box of being just an idea to something they've done in practice? What was the secret for them?
I mean, I think there's many things at play there. One is a sense of threat from geopolitical scenarios and the mobilization of civil society that came with that. Another was, an exceptional group of very civic-minded people who are grounded in a tradition there where civil society has played a huge role, even back to the dictatorship. Mobilizing that civic society, connecting it to the technology was critical. And those things are often very separated in the US. There's like a tech sector that doesn't get very involved with civil society. There's a activist civil society sector that maybe harnesses Twitter, but doesn't really think about the design of technology. So connecting those things up are very powerful. And my hope is that if we tell the story in the right way, if we dramatize it for people, if we make people feel palpably that sense of threat and possibility of connection, that some of that fabric will be created and empower something similar to happen in, say, the US and Europe.
Yeah, all right. Well, on that, I think creating a sense of threat is a good way where to end this conversation. So to both of you, thank you so very much. Again, I knew this would be not just food for thought, but an old buffet of that. And this is definitely what we got. So thank you so much for the keynote and answering the questions. I hope to see you soon in person. And we move on to the next panel, which I am very happily not moderating. So I'll pass the floor to you, Theodora, once again, our editor-in-chief. And I don't know how to call you anymore. You're doing so much for the project, the do-it-all of the Computational Antitrust project. Glenn, Zoe, see you very soon. And Theodora, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Thibaut. It's a great pleasure to be back online. But I must say that after this extremely intellectually stimulating keynote, we have very big shoes to fill. But I'm sure that in such good company, that will not be a problem at all. So just to give our audience a sense of what to expect, what we are doing here is discussing concrete achievements that are possible with computational antitrust as it stands today. And my goal as a moderator today is to steer the discussion towards highlighting exactly what computational tools can do in terms of bringing us forwards compared to analog research tools that we've seen being used in scholarship for centuries. And what I want to do is to speak as little as possible to give as much room to our fantastic panelists. So without further ado, I want to start the discussion by letting them introduce themselves so that the audience knows who they are. I mean, I'm sure most of you already know them and have read their work, but let's give it a start and then take the discussion from there. To not complicate things, let's do it alphabetically. Maybe Andrew, do you want to start by telling us a bit about who you are and what you research on?
Yeah, sure. My name is Andrew Eckert. I'm in the Department of Economics at the University of Alberta. I've been there for about 20 years. I was an economist at the Canadian Competition Bureau before that, and I've been a visiting scholar at the Alberta Utilities Commission. And my long-standing research has been on pricing, on patterns in pricing, on the potential for patterns to be used in coordination, these sorts of things.
Great. That's all very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in today's discussion. I think the next one in the alphabet is Klaus, unless I don't know the alphabet well. And I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm here in Vienna, so it's in the evening and not in the morning. And I'm an economist here at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, and I'm doing since 25 years research on mergers and on regulatory economics. And of course, the recent interest in this topic was quite heavily sparked by this idea that also these small mergers, startup takeovers, can be very problematic from a societal point of view.
Okay, so we have an expert in a very topical issue. That's always very exciting. And now, last but not least, Friso.
Hi, my name is Friso Bostoen. I'm an assistant professor of competition law and digital regulation at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. So most of my research concerns online platforms and how they might or might not abuse their market power and how to analyze all that. But I've also dipped my toes into the computational antitrust pool. Well, a bit more than my toes. I've taken a plunge with a paper on antitrust fines, which I think we'll talk a bit more about today. So thanks a lot for having me, Thibaut, Theodora, and everyone organizing.
Yeah, thanks for the answer, which gives me a great hook to the next question. I will ask you all to give me a 2-3 minute elevator pitch style summary of your article. And since you were the one to mention it first, why don't you give us a start, Friso?
Sure. My paper concerns, well, my co-authored paper together with Bruno van den Bos, who should get a lot of the credit, but who's not on the panel here today, concerns antitrust fines. So the Commission sets antitrust fines when a company violates antitrust law. And that process in which it calculates those fines is sometimes considered opaque, even called a black box. Now, that's not entirely fair. The Commission has made strides in making this process more transparent by issuing guidelines. The latest version comes from 2006, and in those, it sort of sets out a step-by-step process on how a fine is calculated. But still, every step has these upper and lower limits. Some steps, can be left out. Maybe there's other factors that enter into the calculation that are not that obvious. So, in short, quite some discretion remains, and the Commission is not always very clear on how it uses that discretion. So we thought, could maybe computational analysis help us elucidate this fine-setting process? Can it show us which factors really are decisive when setting a fine? Perhaps even uncover something like a fining formula that the Commission relies on. So what we did is take all antitrust fines, or rather all cartel fines specifically, since the latest guidelines in 2006. So that's about 500 fines. We coded some of its data manually, other we had coded automatically via these regular expressions, regexes. And then we used a machine learning method to build decision trees for the fine setting process, divided by every commissioner since 2006. So that would be Commissioner Koos, Almunia, and Vestager, the current commissioner. And in very short, to say what we found, the Commission says fines in a very, maybe almost suspiciously consistent manner, at least when it comes to the basic amount of the fine, so the largest chunk of a fine. It then adjusts that basic amount, and there it gets a bit more tricky. It doesn't always, make these adjustments, for example, for aggravating circumstances. So there, sometimes we had to go away from the computational tools and just dive into the decisions to see what they're doing. But all in all, the formula that we uncovered follows these guidelines fairly closely. So they do go quite a way in making this process more transparent. So I'll leave it there and hope we can come back to some of that.
Yeah, for sure we will. Thanks a lot. This was great. And it's fantastic to see that one of the main themes of the conference seems to be opening up black boxes, shedding light on the unknown. So I really love that. Who wants to go next? Klaus, Andrew?
Okay.
Klaus is your keen, so go ahead.
Okay, then I go ahead. So our paper is also co-authored. It's Florian Sütsch and Ulrich Worak, who is also on the list of spectators. So what we are doing is we look at market definition and how we can use machine learning techniques to do that. So we take all the mergers that were undertaken by GAFAM firms, by the 5 big tech companies, like 1,000 mergers or acquisitions. We match the data, the mergers to Crunchbase, which has 1 million firms plus. And then we estimate cosine similarity scores, so how similar the targets are to their competitors, which is to be determined. And we estimate different cutoffs of those cosine similarity measures, 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, and the larger the measure, the larger is the overlap, is the similarity of the target and potential competitors. And so we estimate then treatment effects with consecutively larger markets, meaning smaller similarity. And what comes out of this, so this would not be possible without those techniques, of course, because it's simply not computationally, simply not possible to do it. And so we apply that, and what comes out is that a similarity of 0.3 to 0.4 gives you the largest treatment effects of those mergers. Treatment on venture capital, negative, which is negative on average. And it's sort of what it should do is, of course, give some additional tool to look at those mergers and acquisitions where you don't have any data on prices or quantities. Like you cannot do traditional market definition. So that's the idea.
That's great. I hope your co-author from the audience is happy with your answer. I definitely am. And on that note, let's see what Andrew has to. Well, I hope you've freed him then. Andrew, do you want to add your input?
Sure. So our paper started from, there's a longstanding debate on the role of information and transparency in a market. For example, transparency on prices of firms, other firm choices. On the one hand, a high degree of information availability and transparency can allow for a more effective consumer search, can allow firms to respond better to changing conditions. But there's also the potential that's been raised that increased transparency in a market can facilitate coordination by allowing firms to better monitor rivals or allow them perhaps to communicate through public information. Now, detecting communication through public information can be really challenging for regulators, for antitrust agencies in settings where firms interact frequently at high frequency. There's a lot of public information that could be manipulated, and there's a wide range of different ways you might manipulate it to send a signal or communicate something. And so we were interested in the potential for machine learning techniques in this context, and we were interested in a specific context, and that's the Alberta wholesale electricity market. Now that market operates hourly. For each hour, firms that generate energy will submit bids saying how much they're willing to supply at certain prices. The market will then clear for the hour, and these bids will determine who generates what and what the market price is. At the end of the hour, the information on bids was revealed, but with no identifying information. So the information on who submitted a particular bid was removed. Now, in August 2013, we're going back a little bit, the Market Monitor, the MSA, released a report alleging that certain firms were using patterns in their bids to reveal their identity, to say this is who submitted this bid, and to send signals about how they plan to behave in the future and to encourage coordination. Now, at the time in that report, the patterns that were identified, and they didn't say what they were, they just said they'd found examples of firms tagging their bids. These patterns were identified through visual inspection of the data and simple summary statistics, looking at modes and other percentiles. And so we thought, well, there's a lot of, in a setting like that, there's a lot of public information. There's a lot of ways you might communicate through pricing, and just visual inspection and simple graphs and simple statistics might not do a very good job. So we wanted to look at the ability of machine learning to detect these sorts of patterns, right? And our particular question was, can we use machine learning to, if you like, test the allegation that firms were bidding in a way that would reveal their identities to rivals in this public information? All right, so we ask whether machine learning algorithms can predict the identities of the firms behind these bids. And what we found was, yes, indeed, we could predict the identities of a firm's rivals, the bids associated with a firm's rivals, with a high degree of accuracy, up to when the Market Monitor released this report in August. And at that time, the ability to predict rivals crashed, right? Because firms changed their behavior once this report came out. What was also interesting was that after the report came out, after a while, the ability to detect rivals increased again, suggesting they can find other ways to communicate besides the patterns that were already identified. It also allowed us to ask, well, the ways that we can identify firms in their bids, are these benign, right? I have a plant that's 50 megawatts, and so I bid 50 megawatts, and everyone figures that out. Or are they patterns that are more suggestive of a deliberate attempt to communicate? And in this setting, for example, it turns out patterns involve things like patterns in the decimal portion of a price, right? 0.6, 0.15, 0.24, a firm submitting that sort of pattern was a specific firm, for example. So I think our paper confirms that machine learning and other computational techniques can be useful in identifying whether public information might be employed for communication, to enhance coordination. And it can also be useful in assessing the degree of information being disclosed in the market. I'll stop there for now.
I love that. I love the ending remark, because that was going to be my next question, but it's great because I can just push the ball back to Klaus and Friso. So the next question was going to be, what did you think that could not be tackled with analog tools, but computational tools could enlighten? And what has made you decide to carry out this research, particularly through using computational techniques? And since Andrew already answered, I think it's for the two of you now to chime in on that. Maybe Klaus, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, as said, those startups, those targets in the mergers, they are very small. They're nascent. They exist since 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So you don't have data on them, with the exception possibly of number of employees or funding rounds. But what you do have is business descriptions. You know in which area they are operating and where they're located. So this is, of course, for market definition, that's a very big problem, because as you might know, the standard market definition tool is the SNP test. So you estimate demand elasticity with prices and quantity data at best. You cannot do that here. Huh? There is no quantity, there's no data, there's no price data. Maybe there's not even a product out there. So it's just an idea possibly, or maybe there's some software. So you cannot do traditional market definition. So you cannot essentially analyze the merger with traditional techniques. So and so we propose, it's not perfect, of course, but it's one way to look at it, to get at this way of competition between targets, the rivals, possibly the acquirer, etc. So this is the idea.
Great, that was very clear. Thanks a lot. Friso, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, so I was triggered to use computational tools, not because I woke up one day and thought, today is a good day for computational antitrust research, but rather because I was having this question on protectionism in EU antitrust law. There's this hypothesis that the European Commission, in enforcing antitrust law, is biased against non-EU firms, specifically US firms. And you'll find this in the statements of US presidents who, when a big merger between two US firms gets blocked, or when a high fine is imposed on a US tech company, they will make some statements about the commission, being anti-US. And there's been some good research on this in the area of merger control, where you sort of have pretty clear-cut decisions. The merger is allowed or it is blocked. Some in between, you do have mergers with remedies, but still, it allows for some fairly clear-cut testing. With the fines imposed, we didn't really have that type of research because it's a more continuous figure. It's difficult to see what the impact of a specific factor is, such as the nationality of a firm. So we're kind of stuck with some anecdotes there, good anecdotes, but not great research. So what we realized is if we want to know whether the nationality of a firm plays a role, we'd have to basically look at a large body of decisions and then figure out, well, what role nationality played in a more or less, solid way. And we quickly realized that going through all cartel decisions, that was just not feasible, or at least we were really not feeling like that. That would cost a lot of time, be very tedious. So instead, we relied on computational tools for, two main reasons, basically. They allow you to go through these large data sets, giving you some measure of certainty. Also introducing some new uncertainty, but it does bring something new to the table. Talking about fines specifically, practitioners have a pretty good sense of those. And even as a researcher, you could read 10 decisions, 20 decisions, 30, but you never get the full picture. And by going through truly every decision and every cartel fine, we could get a sort of more systematic view. Plus, they allowed us also to see some things which otherwise we just couldn't see due to our human limitations. We're interested, as I talked about the impact of nationality on the fine, but there were also 30 other variables that we checked for in fines that we coded. And if I had to read those decisions, keeping those all those variables in mind and spotting the kind of sentences that might hint at the use of that variable, we just my human brain is definitely not capable of that. But computational tools do a much better job. So that's why we've turned to those kind of methods.
Okay, so that's great. You're already showing us a bit how computational tools take us forward. But something you said has triggered me. You said you didn't wake up one day and think it's a good day to do computational antitrust. I think that's because every day is a fantastic day to do computational antitrust. So that's how I see it, at least. Andrew, do you want to add anything to this question? I know you've sort of answered it before, but if you want to add anything, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so just, I made the comment that in a setting where there's a large amount of information that can be manipulated, but even when there's not, right? So even if we were just to focus in this wholesale electricity market on the bids, and that's all, right? So a firm would submit a bid could submit up to 7 bids for each generating unit they have, and a bid would be, here's a quantity I'm willing to supply at a particular price. Even if we just focus on that, the array of possibilities that firms could submit could convey signals, convey information is enormous. It could be in the size of the quantity. It could be in the magnitude of the price. It could be in the second digit of the quantity. It could be in the decimal of the price. It could be in the way that this price relates to the next one. It could be the way that this price relates to what I bid in a previous hour or on a previous day. And so even if we just focus only on the bids, the ability of visual inspection, while visual inspection did find patterns, I also think that it could be worked around. It could be, people could say, okay, well, we can't use this obvious a pattern anymore, we'll use something else. And that's sort of what we saw when we saw the ability to recognize rivals increase again after a few months after the report came out.
I think your answer is great because it really points out to how a very controversial topic in antitrust, as in information transparency, cannot be investigated with analog tools, but if we rely on computational methods, that can really bring us forward to understanding what exactly plays a role in price coordination. Now, let me ask you a different question. Do you think the results of your paper are actionable? And if so, who would be the main stakeholders who can benefit from them? Is it competition agencies? Is it law firms? Is it the industry? Is it perhaps even consumers, fellow academics? What do you think? Who wants to get us started on this one?
Well, if no one else
Klaus,
is picking
you're
up,
smiling.
I'll pipe up since
Okay, Andrew, go
no one
ahead.
else has jumped up. Yeah, I think what we've been doing would be sort of immediately useful as screening tools for coordination, the detection of patterns in pricing and in bids. We can imagine as well within the industry, electricity markets have monitoring agencies. These monitoring agencies have a mandate to monitor market power and possible anti-competitive behavior. These tools can be useful in screening for things that require further investigation, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
I would
Klaus?
I would agree to the screening thing because that's maybe also the case in our case. I mean, defining markets is of course the business of the authorities, of the competition agencies, and if they don't have the data that they need, but they need to take decisions, it would help them possibly, but maybe not only. Maybe also some law firms might be interested in the analysis of those markets, and also maybe venture capitalists could say that I would or would not invest possibly in those similar companies, but mostly it's possibly the competition agencies that might benefit from the application of those techniques.
And Teresa, what about your paper?
Yeah, I think there's some different groups that could benefit. I mean, law firms and industry might be happy to get a better insight into how fines are calculated that might be imposed on them on their clients. But I think perhaps the main intended parties for research are, well, first of all, the European Commission, who sets the actual fines. Of course, I don't think we're really surprising them with our research. Surely they were completely up to date on their own finding methods. But it could spur some reflection, also maybe academic reflection, because one finding that we had is that the Commission sets fines in this very small range. I mean, cartels are sort of the most egregious antitrust offense, and the Commission sets, well, the base amount of a fine, we tend to set that between 0 and 30% of the sales of the cartelized product. So you would say for a cartel, this antitrust offense, that should be on the higher end of the range. It's not exactly what we found. Rather, fines for cartels tend to be around the middle of that range, this 15%, 16%, maybe 17%. So I think the Commission does this strategically because we saw in appeals against fining decisions that, when the Commission sticks to that middle of the range for something as offensive to antitrust as a cartel, the general courts, does not really scrutinize it in much depth. It just passes it along. So it's a safe policy, but we would wonder whether it's also good policy. Shouldn't fines optimize for a goal such as deterrence, and thus, sticking to an exact figure for every type of cartel fine, can it really optimize for the, given the variety of cartels and other restrictive arrangements? So that's maybe something more for academics and the Commission itself to reflect upon. But that's something we definitely hope will be inserted into the debate.
Well, it would be indeed quite surprising if the Commission itself found stuff about their own methodology through your paper. Let's hope that's not the case. That would say a lot about their methodologies. Indeed, you never know. As a follow-up on this, do you think your research could be turned into a template or a tool that could be used by the stakeholders you identified? As in, Klaus, for instance, do you think that your methodology could be easily transferred to law firms or competition agencies? Would you be willing to engage in that? Because as we said yesterday in the intro, what we want to do here is also to create this learning community where we exchange tools and we teach each other how to get further with computational antitrust.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are publicly available databases. There was one question. In Crunchbase, you can, was even free of charge for us, maybe because we are a university. There's a lot of textual information about companies. There's much less information in terms of concrete products or pricing, quantity. So I would say yes, because in the digital economy and in where we are moving, textual information is what you have, and sometimes you don't have other data simply. So you've got to use what it's there, because you have to decide. Huh? And I think the quality of decision can only be better if you have a good idea of the competitive landscape. And what you can also possibly better do with the textual information is to look at how competition evolves over time, because you cannot estimate every year price elasticity of demand. But this evolution of dynamic competition might be also a good part and a good insight for competition agencies. And it's I mean, it's not, I said my co-author did a lot of work in that respect, but I mean, it's not rocket science. Huh? It's standard statistical packages to have implemented it. So it's not that you need super computer experts, a new department of computer experts in every competition authority. So I think yes, it can be, but of course there are some limits to it. It need to be complementary to your other analysis. It's not a standalone analysis. It's not implication that then the decision is there when you apply those techniques. But it may help you getting at better decisions.
So there's two things from your answer which really stood out to me. First, you use the word dynamic in relation to competition, which is one of our favorite word combinations here at our project.
Right.
And then you also said that it's not rocket science to do computational antitrust, which is of course great news for everyone in the audience to maybe get brave and experiment with computational tools. Andrew, what about you? Do you think you could maybe give a hand to the industry, competition agencies, firms to learn from your paper?
Sure. I mean, again, I would repeat that our techniques were in some sense quite off the shelf, right? I mean, we were using well-established algorithms, random forest decision trees, and discovering how well these algorithms, these off-the-shelf algorithms, could detect patterns. And that was maybe my favorite part of the project, was digging into what these decision trees were actually doing and saying, you know what, they actually are doing the job. So, and in terms of data, in the industry that we're working at, electricity, there's an enormous amount of data available to the regulators and monitoring agencies. But again, the patterns we were looking for were in data of quantities and prices, and where this is available, these sorts of algorithms could be applied. So I don't think. I think that what we've been doing so far is using conventional tools many people will be familiar with, and using data that many people will have access to in certain settings.
That's also great to figure out that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to come up with such important insights for competition enforcement. And that's also refreshing. Now going back to Friso, I want to tweak the question a bit. Do you think that the methodology you used can be applied to other types of competition decisions? Do you envisage such research being done in the future by the academics that you identified as the key stakeholders of your paper? Or maybe by yourself, you never know.
Yeah, of course. The right of first refusal to follow up research. Yes and no. I mean, we definitely want to create the opportunity for that. So what we did is make all our data openly accessible on the GitHub page of my co-author, even the scripts we use. So for example, what you could easily do is extend this to the future, see how the finding methodology of the European Commission changes when new decisions come out, whether our formula that we found still has that same predictive value. So that's kind of an easy extension. You could also apply it to fines in other areas. But there you run up to the problem of data, because of course the data, like for cartel fines, is openly available, kind of in a difficult format. You have to go through the PDFs. That's why we put them all in an Excel table that's up online. But once you have the data, there needs to be, to do the kind of analysis that we did, you need a good amount of it. And abusive dominance decisions, for example, are there's only a couple of them, even if you go back through the last 20 years, not really enough to do the same kind of quantitative analysis. So you run up to some limits in extending the methodology there, but you could definitely look at maybe cartel fines by national competition authorities. Do they work with similar methodologies, differences? What does that mean? And I think maybe what I'd love to see someone do, but I don't think it'll be me because I just haven't figured out a good way to do it, is to build on this, to look at the effectiveness of antitrust fines. But there I feel, again, you run up to some data issues. What are the cartels prevented, deterred by a fine? This becomes very difficult. But if somebody has ideas, I'd love to listen to them.
This is something we really want to encourage at our project, research on the effects of enforcement, because we don't see that happening a lot. And also when we publish our annual report, there's not enough work being done in terms of what effects enforcement has had upon market structures, market practices, and so on. But maybe Klaus or Andrew, do you think you would be interested in looking at that in the future?
Yeah.
Klaus, I see you coming closer, so I guess that's a sign of an intention to speak.
I jump into it. Definitely, yes. I mean, as I said, it's a complementary, for me at least, it's complementary technology to theory. I mean, it will not be abolished. Theorizing and theories of harm will not be gone. Of course, we need them. But it's a supplementary, complementary technology. It's very useful. And in this other paper, we looked at how competition changed among the GAFAM firms in the last 20 years. And of course, we could not do that without those similarity measures. So they became more similar to each other. Of course, it's not a proof that they fiercely compete with each other, but it's an indication. And then maybe you could then look at it in more detail and look at it whether it's plausible over time, and you get maybe at something then. So definitely, it's not one shot. And Ulrich is in another project, one of the co-authors in a large scale project. You could look at patent data and the abstracts of patents, for example. There are 100 million patents out there. Every patent has an abstract, and so it's too precious to leave it in the ground, and we need to lift it.
Andrew, do you agree that it's too precious to be left where it is and we need to do more with it? Or you want to disagree?
Oh, no.
This would be a bad audience to disagree with, but
yeah, I'm not
go
going to
ahead.
disagree with that, right? I see first of all, further directions we could go even with our own context and that we're trying to do, right? As I said, we were using off-the-shelf algorithms, but there's also a large literature on pattern recognition, and there's scope for applying that here. And that's something, I mean, this has been applied to text analysis, crime data analysis, consumer purchases. There's scope to be using these sorts of things here, right? Going back to the question of the influence of the regulatory interaction on behavior, I think we have a sort of nice example in this paper that once they released a report saying we think firms are pricing in a certain way, suddenly everybody stopped. But it didn't mean that the ability of information to be conveyed went away. It just meant they had to be a little smarter about it. But no, I think we're in the process of taking algorithms from other contexts to bring them more to bear in here to see if they can do a better job. But I think on the same, the other side of the coin is that what we're doing here could be brought to bear to other settings as well. If that answered your question.
Great. Yeah, that definitely answered my question. Also happy that there's no disagreement. That would complicate my position as a moderator. So thanks a lot for that. Now, I just want to take a step back and remind the audience that you each look at controversial but very important aspects of competition law. So we have market definition, we have cartel fines, and we have price transparency. You all did research which is novel in terms not just of the tools you applied, but also the findings you've come up with. Building on these findings, do you think that what you've realized through your research could inform better antitrust policies? Or have you perhaps identified some blind spots of the current rules? What do you think? This is a hard one, so let's see what you have to say. Frieza, you look very keen.
Yeah, I could maybe start off. I think the clearest sort of policy area was obviously the setting of antitrust fines, and then the main finding that should animate any policy changes, if any, would be just the fact that, well, we see the Commission setting fines very safely in that middle of the range, say, 16% of cartelized sales. Of course, translating that to policy, that's where another sort of arduous journey begins, because, well, the Commission might have some good reasons to impose those sort of fines. It's procedurally efficient. You're not going to get annulled on appeal, which is nice if you worked on a decision for years. So it might be a smart policy. So you have to take account not only of the fact that we're not optimizing for deterrence, maybe, but at least deterrence is also not optimal if cartel fines are annulled all the time and cartels get away without a fine because the decision didn't hold up. So there's definitely, I think, room for debate there, and I think if this range that the Commission came up with in the first place is solid, then they should probably stick to that, and which means slightly higher cartel fines, maybe lower for other types of arrangements. But yeah, in the translation to policy, there's a lot of other considerations, so it becomes a bit more fuzzy. There's not a one-on-one connection either.
I see. Well, if they just discovered their methodology through your paper, then perhaps we'll see changes in the future. If that's not the case, then I guess they'll stick to what they're doing now. Klaus, do you think we can define markets better in the future, building on your research? Or not necessarily better, to put it in a less normative way, differently?
Maybe some markets, for those that are those nascent markets where you don't have other information, where the products are still in their infancy, it might be good to have at least some methodology to apply. Maybe in other more traditional markets where everything is clear, or where you have all the necessary traditional data, it's not so important possibly to look at machine learning techniques. But in this, we looked at, I think, as I said, it's complementary, and one should use it. If you have it, you should use it.
I think that's a great approach, to see computational tools as a complement and not necessarily a full-fledged replacement to whatever we are doing now. And that's pretty much the approach we're taking here. We're trying to incrementally improve things, not to reinvent the wheel from scratch. And Andrew, what do you think? Have you identified any blind spots of antitrust?
Well,
any improvement points?
I think that what this algorithm, what this type of analysis can do is help regulators and antitrust agencies understand the implications of transparency in particular settings. So in electricity, for example, a lot of information in near real time or real time can be made available. As a concrete example, of course, in the Alberta setting, they did have this rule that at the end of the hour, they would release all the bids that were submitted, but they would de-identify them. And so at minimum, this suggests that this effort at de-identifying was not successful, because you could figure out who was submitting bids. It might have even created disadvantages and advantages if more sophisticated players are better able to work out, to learn information from as to who's submitting the bids and what signals are being sent. in other settings, in a lot of markets worldwide, in gasoline, agencies have started, or governments have started posting on websites. Here's all the prices of all the stations in an area. The idea being, let's increase transparency so that consumers can better do search and find the lowest price. But of course, if you're increasing transparency for consumers, you're also increasing transparency for firms. And so therefore, this potential for, are you creating increased potential for coordination? Well, that's something that these sorts of algorithms might be used to assess.
Indeed, and that's fundamental for competition agencies to understand, and you did an amazing job at illuminating to them what the effects of price transparency are. So great job at that. Now I have a question dedicated to you in your role as researchers. So something that you see a lot in, or I see a lot in computational research, is that people tend to be very cautious, and there's
Now we don't hear you.
I was about to ask, do you also lose her? All right. Unfortunately, I'm not ChatGPT, so it's hard for me to fill in the blanks. And I have no clue the answer she wanted to ask. So anyone would like to sing a song right now, maybe for us, for time? She has time to come back. Let me send her a text.
I'm sure this was just a way to build suspension, because the question that was coming seemed very, heavy and important. So this is just a
very intense
I'm
question.
back. Did you get to hear my question?
Not yet.
No.
Okay, I guess academic Wi-Fi systems cannot be trusted. That's also an insight of this conference and something to be remembered for future purposes. Where did I cut off? My question was whether your use of computational tools has changed your approach to doing research. Do you think that in the future you will be more brave in terms of the topics you choose, or in what other respects do you think computational tools can impact what research we do and what we can dare to research in antitrust in general? You all seem to be thinking very hard, so I don't dare appoint anyone here. I just let you choose whomever is ready to speak.
Well, I guess I can jump in. So for me, this was really my first foray into applying machine learning techniques. And so I was leaning heavily on co-authors, Douglas and Daniel, who have a lot of expertise in this area. Now, this project has definitely brought me into seeing the advantages of these techniques, particularly for predictive exercises, particularly for exercises involving large quantities of data. Absolutely. I am currently now pursuing with these co-authors other projects, other competition-related projects, using similar techniques. And I think in a world of such large and complicated and high frequency data, it's sort of inevitable that you need to rely on these sort of techniques.
Klaus, would you agree?
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, it depends on the research question, and if you have good data, otherwise maybe you bought some data on price and quantity, possibly you don't need that. But if you have more this text-based, for example, the European Commission, can download every case, every merger case, every decision of the last 25 years. Some 10,000 decisions, and the average length is, I don't know, 50 pages, 100 pages. So you can imagine you cannot do it by case. It would be a PhD's life would be too short to do that. But with those techniques, you can maybe estimate, I don't know, something on the version ratios or something on differentiate products between target and rival or acquirer and target, which you might not or cannot do simply by reading those cases. And so, yes, it will shape, I think, research, but it depends on the question and the data you have at hand. So be
I think
opportunistic.
it's great how you pointed out that it's indeed very tedious to download decisions one by one, but then again, we know that academics have this passion of collecting PDFs and never reading them, but keeping them there just in case one day they will be relevant, or they will seem
Yeah,
they will seem
then
very
you
pressing
make
to read.
measures like number of pages or number of words, which you can easily count, but of course, this doesn't give you what you want to have. No? So you need to go into the meaning of the text. For example, differentiated products is a hot topic. Innovation, efficiencies. These are the hot topics.
Indeed.
Might be analyzable with those techniques.
Definitely. And Friso, how have computational tools brought you forward from downloading PDFs?
Yeah, still my main job, but no, I think it's a good point. It depends on the question. I was thrown into this by just the nature of the question requiring it, at least the way I saw it. And you know, as an antitrust lawyer by training, that was still quite of a challenge. You know, antitrust lawyers are always comfortable cosplaying as economists. So I thought, okay, we can also cosplay as a computer scientist. Turned out to be more difficult than I expected. Luckily, I had a co-author who was more proficient in that, but still, you have to be there, you know, every step of the way, make sure everything makes sense, solve 101 problems. So I think, you know, this project had the longest runtime of any other publication, except perhaps my PhD thesis itself that I went through. So if I come up with another question that requires it, I might go back to computational methods, but also remember that it's a lot of work, a lot of downloading of PDFs. So I'm warning myself there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see in your career as an antitrust scholar what other hats you'll put on apart from an economist and a software engineer. I think there was a question in the Q&A about data sources. I cannot see it anymore after it was thrown out. Can maybe one of you read it out loud and also give an attempt at answering it? Or has it disappeared for you as well?
No, it's what are key sources of data for computational techniques, data available from marketplaces, scraping public data from the marketplaces, use some regulatory authority to demand certain data.
Yes, that's it. And I love it when my panelists also ask themselves the questions. It makes my job way, way easier. So given that Klaus has put the effort of reading the question, maybe one of the others want to get us started?
I mean, there are, of course, the internet provides a lot of data sources, but also the regulatory authorities, like 10K reports from the SEC. But I think any source might be good, but of course, it needs to be somehow structured. There's a recent development to use registry data from the statistical offices, which is very interesting development because, of course, they are much cleaner, which gives you answers you cannot give this data from the internet. So I think it's a hodgepodge of data sources. I would not exclude one. I mean, it depends how much money you have. You can also buy very good data from Standard & Poor's or something. But we for example, in our paper, the Crunchbase was there, but you could also take other databases, and it's reasonable to utilize whatever you have. Huh?
Yeah, I think that's a good policy to have in life as a baseline. Use whatever you have and then see what that brings you.
Because this is what those techniques maybe has an advantage. You're not overwhelmed by the sheer size of the data, but you can apply those techniques. Huh? So they need not be so structured as we usually like them or need them.
Yeah, so for our question, which really sort of an initial screening for coordination, I don't think you'd be at that point. You'd be demanding data. Certainly, the work that we did used data that in the industry market monitoring agencies would routinely have. Right, this was nothing that they would have to go out and get. If you were screening for coordination in another setting, it might be that you would need to obtain say price data, scrape them from websites or something like that. Certainly in the industry you're working with, these agencies would have these data routinely in real time. And so there was nothing they would have to go out and obtain. But in other settings, I mean, certainly, in the past, I've had to scrape data off airline websites, and I've had to visit bars to get prices. And so there's different ways to get information. But in this project, it was all stuff that would be readily on hand.
So you said two things which I found quite interesting. First, that you sometimes have to play detective to do computational research, as in go to bars. I think that's that's indeed very entertaining. But then you also said that the data we have brings us a long way, and I think that's very true. And now just to give Friso the last word, what data did you use? Was it just PDFs?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely steal the method of going to bars to get data. Not sure if they'll be relevant, but it seems like good fun thing to do. No, we relied on enforcement data, and the nice thing, at least with an agency like the Commission, is at least you have the full-fledged decisions all in a database. It's not the most user-friendly database, and in fact they're now changing that. But at least you do find that place to download all the PDFs, and then you can take it from there. So that was our method.
Great, not as fun as going to bars indeed, but you do what you can. And now we have a last question, which is very seasonal and topical. Given that Christmas is coming, somebody asks, do you have a wish list of data manipulation tools or data sources you'd love to get from Santa Claus or whomever will give you gifts this season? I see you're silent, so maybe you've been all naughty this year and no gifts for you, or I don't know.
You don't believe in it anymore. So, wish list. Well, what is surprising is that talking about those GAFAM companies, that so little is known about them. I mean, they worth, I don't know, $5 trillion, and nobody knows their advertising structure, their consumer structure, other very important data. So looking inside those tech giants would be possibly one of my unfulfillable wishes for Christmas.
I'll make sure to let Santa know. What about the others? Andrew, do you have your letter to Santa ready?
Well, so in the context of electricity, for example, there even within what marketing monitors have and what's publicly available, there's lots of information on real-time pricing, but what tends to be lacking is contractual information, right? Have they contracted forward for certain quantities at certain prices? They can certainly do that, and that data tend not to be available, but as we know that it can have large implications for their incentives to exercise market power. And so if Santa's listening, some data on forward contracts would be welcome.
And Friso, what do you want for Christmas?
Yeah, I would love some data that I'm not sure is even out there. So, but I'm sure Santa can find a way to get it, which is the rate of cartels being found out. There are estimates of this, of course, but to really know, is it 1 out of 2 cartels, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10 that is actually fined by a regulatory authority? I think once we know that, you could start saying something much more sensible about the effectiveness of the fines we've been looking at. So that'd be great data if Santa has it lying around.
Great. So if Santa is in the audience and if you were good this year and you behaved, then you'll all get amazing data sources and data manipulation tools this Christmas. If not, then we'll have our answers. And on that note, I'll pass it over to Thibaut to ensure the transition to the next equally exciting panel, I would say. And thanks a lot for all of you for joining. It was great fun to talk to you, and Merry Christmas, and hope you get your wishes come true.
Yeah,
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Theodore.
I'm so pleased not to have to answer that question about the wish list. That sounds like a very hard question. All right. I'll just here to make the junction with the next panel. yesterday, for those of you who were with us, we had a agency carousel in which we asked 4 competition agencies to showcase what they do with computational tools. This year, we decided to invite 2 companies to showcase the tools that they have developed. I will pass the floor to Carol, and I'm sure I will insist on the same, but just to make it very clear, those 2 companies are not sponsors. We are not receiving money from those companies or any other companies. They are solely invited because we thought that what they do is something for you to discover. On that, Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Thibaut. Just to confirm, everyone can hear me, right? With the perfect.
Yes.
Well, so yet again, welcome everyone, and I'm really pleased that everyone here is joining us for this conference today for the second day of our computational antitrust. And yeah, we will move to our next panel of today, when we are going to be discussing the questions of actual application of computational antitrust in practice. And today with us are Nathalie and Daniel. And thank you so much for both of you for joining us. And I hope you will as well enjoy the panel equally as all of our participants. Without further ado, I would like to ask both of you to first introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you also came into this legal tech, basically, landscape. And then we can start with your presentations. And after both of your presentations, we will move to the Q&A questions, of course. So I will now mute myself and disappear.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Sure. Hi, so I'm Daniel Schwartz. I've been working as a competition lawyer for more than 10 years in a Magic Circle firm in London, in a competition authority, and then also at the IMF in Washington as their competition law lead. And I absolutely love competition law. I love how it's academic, I love how it's purposeful, I love how it's connected to and rooted in economics. And I'm going to be doing competition law for the rest of my life. But then my world changed when I saw ChatGPT, seeing the way it wrote so beautifully, how it structured ideas, and it became clear that competition law is not only my future, but also AI is going to be the future in so many industries, and law is no exception. And so that's really what brought me to legal tech, to computational antitrust, and seeing how we can marry both competition law and AI to find tools that can really help competition lawyers.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Nathalie?
Hi, my name is Natalie DeCesar. I'm a recent law grad in 2022, and I found my way to the world of legal tech kind of non-traditionally. I worked as legal operations for a technology company specializing in criminal record clearing. So that was like my first taste of how technology can enable really justice impact endeavors. And I wound up finding my way to CaseText, where I'm now the AI prompting specialist on a team of other prompters. And I'm very excited to see the intersection of legal and tech so early in my career, and pretty much intersecting with every legal use case you can imagine, today being antitrust. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Nathalie. I must say that I'm also really pleased that both of you are now in this pretty novel, but also peculiar field. I myself also started my legal career also as a legal engineer at my law firm. So I was basically doing the facilitation of legal reasoning and processes through the corporate point of view. And great to see that there are more of us in that endeavor, and let's see where we can go. I was thinking that would one of you prefer to start with your presentations, and do you prefer to share your screen yourself, or would you like me to do that for you? What would be better?
I'm fine with them. If you'd like to share my presentation, and we could do it that way if you'd like.
All right, perfect. Then if you're all right, Nathalie, we're going to start with your presentation, then we're going to move to Daniel.
Of course. Thank you, Daniel, for letting me go first. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Perfect. So hi again, my name is Natalie, and I'm going to introduce you all to co-counsel. Just to preface, CaseText, the developers of CodeCounsel, was recently acquired by Thomson Reuters, best known for Westlaw. So just wanted to throw that out there, but we can continue on now. So like many of you probably already know, CodeCounsel is built off of OpenAI's GPT-4, the most sophisticated and advanced large language model. What's really unique about CodeCounsel, though, and why I'm excited to talk to you all, is because some people fear that legal tech is going to replace lawyers or replace the due diligence that lawyers do. But here at CaseText, we see CodeCounsel as a tool for lawyers to delegate those sophisticated and substantive legal work, so to free their time to the more strategic and the work that only humans can do. And that's what we're really excited about CodeCounsel bringing into the legal field. Next slide, please. So real brief, CodeCounsel differs from public LLMs in a couple very strategic ways. First of all, we use retrieval augmented generation. So unlike those crazy news reports we see where there's a lot of hallucinations and tech could be very good at making up very convincing legal arguments and just pretend case law, we don't have that problem with CodeCounsel because it's rooted in sources of truth. It shows its work, it cites its sources, and it's the lawyer's responsibility. The lawyer is always in control, whatever legal professional is using it, to verify before you produce that final work product. It's also trained by lawyers and sophisticated engineers like you all have experience in. And lastly, it's on secured servers and we value confidentiality. We're not using one use case's prompts to train for someone else's use cases. Moving on. So high level overview, I think CodeCounsel is exciting because it probably has a skill for whatever legal use you need. Whether you're an antitrust litigator, you're more on the transactional side, I have no doubt we probably have a skill that you could use. So let's go through. Thank you. No, that's perfect. Go on. So I listed out the top probably 10 use cases, but just to reiterate, CodeCounsel has an antitrust lens. If you just click on it, should. There we go. So it's domain specific. So once again, we're not talking about an AI chatbot that's linked to the internet that thinks that it might know some law. It knows the legal documentation and it is domain specific. And it actually can understand your specific use case. So if you click one more time, I asked CodeCounsel, I asked CaseText, do you understand what an antitrust lawyer even does? And it does. It understands that it's an intersection of sophisticated law and economics and negotiations, and there's litigation built in, and it can take all that complicated persona and put it in and build that into its responses you give us. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So if you keep clicking, I just listed out the top 10, what we think are the top 10 use cases for antitrust legal professionals. And I'm going to briefly go through one by one. Maybe at the Q&A, if you have any follow-up questions, that would be a good time for that. But let's go on to the first one. So reviewing documents for antitrust violations. This is a really exciting and a very common use for CodeCounsel for you all. So you could provide CodeCounsel an array of different documentation. It could be emails, different types of correspondence, text files, memos, internal and external. We take all that documentation and you could query CodeCounsel to identify potential anti-competitive activities or antitrust violations and ask for specific pieces of communication. So it will not only identify yes, no, that type of information exists in your data set, but yes, here it is, here's the source, and here's some analysis on it. So if you click one more time, should show us the prompt. So since I'm going from a prompting lens, you would prompt CodeCounsel like, please identify potential evidence of anti-competitive activities or antitrust violations in these documents. And the really exciting part is that CodeCounsel knows what these words mean, what legal jargon is. So you don't have to spend the time giving it a ton of definitions and really nuanced prompting. Now, if you get to that level, that's when an expert like myself comes in and is assigned the case and we get to work together. So not a bad idea, but it understands the jargon and it, moreover, doesn't just think of it explicitly. So it won't just look through all your documentations and say, oh, I don't on surface level see something that relates to your question, so it doesn't exist. It understands nuance and implied language and correlation. So it will at least give you an overbroad answer that you can finesse and fine tune to your legal considerations. Let's go to the next slide. Competitive data analysis is another big feature I think antitrust legal professionals would like. So for example, you could take, let's say you've already done the work. You have some market analysis, you've done some of your own research, and you don't want that to go to waste just because you're using this cool CoCounsel tool. You don't have to. You could upload all that documentation and hard work, and CoCounsel can iterate off of it. So you could formulate questions related to those legal considerations that you care about. And for example, this goes, CoCounsel, please answer these questions, the list of questions you've already formulated based on the uploaded work product that you have given it. And it could go through and really enhance and enable all the hard work you've already done, which I find fascinating because many of our users, they have years of experience, of big law firm experience. They have tons of documentation. They already know how to do what they do to the best of their ability. They need a tool that can enable everything they've already created, and CoCounsel is perfect for that. Let's go to the next slide, please. Reviewing competitive agreements. This is a standard one, but a very important one too. So you can upload your contracts or other types of agreements, and CoCounsel has the ability to assess whether the contracts raise potential concerns. Because it is tested on sources of truth, legal documentation, it understands the best practices and the worst practices and concerns in your legal lens, in this case, antitrust. So you can ask a question, review these contracts and identify if the terms of a non-compete clause are excessive in their duration or geographic scope. That sounds like a question you'd ask a co-counsel or coworker, or maybe your new associate. Co-counsel can do that very same thing. You could delegate these kind of questions, these kind of starting areas of work to get you off the ground and get your case moving forward quicker. Next slide, please. And identifying antitrust issues during due diligence. This is a big one too. So many of you probably have to deal with dozens and hundreds maybe of contracts and reviewing M&A deals. Well, what's really interesting is that you could expedite the due diligence process because CoCounsel can flag the potential concerns. Similar to the last use, this is a little different. So it could analyze these contracts, and you could just give it very general terminology, and it can flag all the potential price fixing issues. And you could go through issue by issue. So if you've already have your way of doing things, and these are the set issues, and you need to find these, you go one by one and you prompt CoCounsel, and it will find and flag those issues. And you could actually use other skills to then maybe draft a correspondence or a memo or do further legal research. It's really interesting the interplay all the different skill sets can have to produce the best outcome. Let's go on to the next slide, please. And an anti-case law analysis. So this is one of our most common use skills. It's our legal research memo skill. So let's say you hand this off, you delegate some of this work to a new associate, and they need some help, but thankfully you all have hired CoCounsel. And so you could, prompt the CoCounsel to go through some precedents and find the baseline starting place to do your own research. And it can provide it in a structured memo that details the case law, the analysis, cites its sources. So you could go in and instead of being nervous about hallucinations, it will cite every single source and it will hyperlink to that source. So you could read it for yourself and you can finesse and fine tune it as needed. So an amazing use of delegating to the best of its ability. Let's go to the next slide. I really like this one. I think it's pretty cool. I value the fact that many of our clients or users of CoCounsel already have very strict business practices and policies that they adhere to, that they need to utilize in every kind of contract they review. And so what you could do with CoCounsel is you could upload a database of all your contracts you need reviewed. Then you could tell CoCounsel your business policies or your internal policies that you need every contract to align with, and it will go through and analyze every contract and flag any situation where it may not be aligned with your internal policies. This is a really great way to make sure that compliance is being considered, and it's being done very, very quickly, literally minutes instead of hours spending time doing this. On to the next one, please. This one is an important feature too. So again, if you're not sure where to start, or you have a lot of past filings, the DOJ or FTC, and you need to sift through them and get a sense of what in the world is going on, you could create a database of all those past filings. And then you could ask co-counsel, can you identify information about this very specific type of situation? That might be your situation. And you could go through that over and over again. So again, co-counsel is an excellent place, a starting place for your research or ending place for your research. Let's keep going. This one, I think my manager really emphasized to me as someone who was a previous antitrust litigator, how important the second request process is. So co-counsel, you can upload all your relevant documentation, create your own, unique database, and then given the questions from the DOJ or FTC, you could ask co-counsel instead, here's the question the DOJ sent over for a second request. Can you please identify any documentation within our data set that properly answers or addresses this question? I think that's a phenomenal use of co-counsel in the antitrust space, saving hours of time. And from there, you can continue to fine tune and find all the documentation you need to properly answer those second requests. A really important regulatory step that co-counsel can assist you with. I think we have one more. And summarization. It doesn't like someone summarizing everything for you and giving you the high notes. Co-counsel can do that too. I think it's really important in the regulatory space where there's always seems to be something new being published, and it's always very long and tedious to read, but necessary. Well, co-counsel is able to summarize to whatever depth and breadth that you need. So you could ask for brief, detailed, comprehensive, and again, it's always showing its work and citing its sources. And that's the gist of my presentation. So I'm really excited to answer questions after Daniel gets his chance, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, absolutely fascinating. I must say personally as well, from my personal experience, what was happening, I think it was great. Thank you so much. Daniel, would you like to go further? And then we're going to go to Q&A.
Kira, would it be possible for you to share the presentation? I'm just having some issues on my end.
Yes.
Cool, thanks. If you could also share the link to www.competitionlaw.ai in the chat, that would be great.
Of course, I will do that. Let's go step by step.
I will share the link in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
Amazing, thanks, Thibault.
Wonderful, merci. Good.
Great, thank you. So welcome to Competition AI. We're using AI to make life easier for competition lawyers. And we're building products for the whole competition law community, whether it's law firms or in-house or competition authorities, whether you're doing competition or FDI work, research or M&A, whether you're in the US, Europe, Asia, or elsewhere. So I'm going to tell you who we are, what we've released so far, what comes next, and also how people who are excited and interested in AI and how it can be used in competition law, how they can get involved and become part of the journey. And I should mention first that Competition AI isn't connected to any particular law firm. So who are we? Well, I mentioned before how I've been working as a competition lawyer for 10 years, and the way I saw the world completely changed after ChatGPT was released, in particular GPT-4, now, which is the most advanced model, which was released a few months ago. So I spoke to one of my best friends, Johnny, who's, I mentioned, an absolute tech genius. And we started building tech, and we experimented, tested, and pretty soon we realized that we could actually build AI products that can really help competition lawyers. But it's one thing to experiment, and it's another thing to actually build production-ready software that could be used by lawyers in the real world. So we put together a team with AI expertise, machine learning expertise, user experience, user design experience. And we started working on more detailed products. So what have we released so far? Next slide. So ChatGPT is amazing at writing. It's beautiful at structuring ideas. But if you ask it a question, especially if it's in a niche area, if it doesn't have the answer, sometimes it can hallucinate, it can make things up. And it can also be difficult to check the source of the information. So what we did is we decided to build ChatGPT, but for competition lawyers. So if you want to know how to use it, so first go online to www.competitionlaw.ai, and thank you, Thibaut, for including the link. You decide which jurisdiction you want to ask a question about, and you'll see there's 4. There's CMA for the UK, European Commission, obviously for the EU, a US one, and one for financial services, lawyers in the UK focusing on competition, just because that's where my personal practice area was. So you decide which jurisdiction you want to ask a question about, and you ask your question in the box. And what happens is competition AI uses AI to search through thousands of pages of competition authority guidance. It then uses that to identify the information that's relevant. It uses that information to answer the question, and then crucially, it shows you the source of that information. And what this means is that answers are grounded in competition law guidance, and it shows you the sources, so you can independently verify that the answer is accurate. We launched this around a month ago, and already it's being used by more than 50 organizations, law firms, competition authorities in more than 20 countries. And if you haven't used it, then you're missing out and you need to catch up. The day that we launched, OpenAI was having some issues. They were doing their own products upgrades, and out of sheer bad luck, the OpenAI API stopped working or it slowed down. So if you've tried to use competition AI, particularly in the early stages, and it seemed a bit slow or you didn't get the answer you were looking for, then please do try again, because those issues of competition AI have now been resolved. So what comes next? So I've showed you the first draft of our first product, and what we've released so far, as I said, is just the first draft. We called it an advanced testing version, and we're just finalizing a major upgrade. So in a few days, when you take a look at the product again, you go to the website, you'll see it actually looks very different to what it is now. So watch this space. We've also been building some other really exciting products, and they use AI to help competition lawyers. We have a team of AI machining and learning and user experience experts building them. And it's worth taking a step back. What are we trying to achieve here? Ultimately, this is trying to make competition lawyers' lives easier. It'll make their work more accurate. It'll make our work more efficient. And ultimately, that's going to benefit clients. It's going to enable us to win more work as lawyers. As I said, I'm a competition lawyer. I'm going to be a competition lawyer for the rest of my life. I've been building products with the team that I know will help competition lawyers. And it's not just for law firms, it's also for in-house, it's for competition authorities. And so if you have an idea, something that you want, something you're trying to achieve, then we can build it. So definitely reach out. I was speaking to the general counsel of a competition authority the other day, and she was saying how what we've built in our search techniques would actually be really helpful for them as a competition authority. And so it's really something that's worth looking at in more detail to see how we can help you. We're building products for the whole competition law community, and community for this really matters for me. The whole goal is to benefit competition lawyers. So if you're interested in that, if you want to be part of the journey, if you want to provide feedback, if you want to say how you think you can help our products, if you want to get involved, then email me at daniel@competitionlaw.ai. And also sign up to competitionlaw.ai to see how the product works for yourself. Send it to your colleagues to see what they think. And as I said, most people are really starting to use these products. So don't be the one who's left behind by AI. So this is fun. It's the future because it's AI. And really, I think it's also the future of competition law. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It was also extremely interesting to see how you applied it specifically to the competition law field and to make, basically more precise application of AI to one specific field of law. I think I'll start with one question, which has been puzzling, I believe, many people in the legal industry. I think the predominant amount of law firms, we're currently working on the fee basis, right? So we bill our clients per hour, which we're working on. And here, of course, it's great. It makes our work more efficient, but it also decreases time we spend on a case. And the question is, how do you think automation of the procedures gonna improve, or gonna fit within the notion of billing? Question to both of you, so you can take turns and let me know what are your thoughts about it.
So maybe I should go first. So a few things. Firstly, law firms have to put the interests of their clients first. And if there is software which can make work done faster, more accurately, and more efficient, clients are not going to go to law firms if there's a better way of doing things, and law firms are intentionally doing that. And in reality, what we see is huge amounts of innovation using AI to put clients first by law firms. Secondly, in-house lawyers are trying to do much more with loads of demands, but with fewer resources. So this enables in-house competition lawyers to do more and to send less work out to law firms. And then thirdly, this is also going to help competition authorities because they also do lots of research. They do lots of tasks which can be automated and assisted using AI. So I think it's something that's worth thinking, but AI is the future and those issues are going to be resolved.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Natalia, what would be your take on that?
I think everything Daniel said is completely true. I would just add, at least in the United States, what we're seeing is different state bar associations are passing advisory materials saying how law firms are allowed to bill if they're going to be using AI, not to bill extra to make up the billable hours they're saving by using technology. So it's a very fluid process right now, but I think more and more we'll see advisory opinions from state bars, at least in the US, advising law firms on how they're allowed to bill their clients if they're using tools like AI that expedite the work materials so quickly, where now they could take on more work and probably honestly bring more profit into their company because they're working faster and smarter.
Absolutely right.
Thank you so much. I must say I absolutely agree also with your take. And at the end of the day, long-term speaking, if you don't automate, someone else will, and then very long-term you will lose. Well, that also perfectly brings us to another question I got from the audience, and it directs to you again, Natalie. The question is, does CoCounsel operate for jurisdictions outside of the United States? And does it adapt to different legal systems in that respect? So like European law applicability in different member states and other persuasive legal sources.
Sure, thank you for whoever asked that question. So in 2024, CoCounsel is going international. Now with our acquisition with Thomson Reuters, we are being implemented in all the different products and services Westlaw provides. So we hope to have CoCounsel available in the EU and other locations shortly. And with that, the ability to fine-tune the jurisdiction in the prompting to make sure it's accurate.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I see our time is almost running to an end, so I'm going to drop one more question into the discussion, and then we can slowly move to the next panel. Question is, so I understand, and I guess everyone else as well, that when we automate and we make it more efficient, it's good in the long term for also law firm and of course for clients. But the human nature, at least in many countries, so also especially in Europe for my personal practice, is that clients as well are a little bit like reluctant to hear that their lawyers are using AI to answer their questions. And as, of course, many people would say that, of course, the computer can answer a lot of things much better than an actual human being. There are multiple people who would disagree and say, yeah, but we would really like a a person who is alive and breathing to answer my query, and also like I'm paying money for someone who is actually alive to take care of my question. So how would you both think we can persuade clients as law firms to trust AI from that perspective?
I think firstly, we have to make law stay a human-centric business. Someone has to be responsible. Someone has to independently verify and check the work that, or the research that's done by an AI bot. You also need to be careful about things like client confidentiality and make sure that that's protected. Again, all of this has to be about putting the clients first. But at the end of the day, if we can do things more efficiently, and if we can have a system like we've created at Competition AI to show the user the sources so they can independently verify it, that'll be most likely to get the best outcome for the client.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Natalie, what would you think?
Absolutely. I second everything Daniel said. Lawyers have, roles of responsibility they have to adhere to. And those responsibilities include being current on different legal technology and staying up to date on the best practices to give the best justice. So lawyers have a duty to a certain extent to learn this different technology and AI and be transparent with their clients that they're using it. I've seen many law firms start to use transparency clauses within their engagement letters, letting people know we will be using AI, but you're always in control. That's something Casetext values a lot too. The whole point is the human-centered approach. You're always in control and you're responsible for validating the results before you sign off as an attorney.
Perfect. As some would say, just keep a human in the loop, but let the laptop and the computer to pre-deliver, facilitate your life a little bit, and then move forward. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for this wonderful panel. I wish both of you the best of luck with your endeavors in business, and I hope that more and more of us will be who would like to automate legal proceedings and make the life of clients and also of regulatory agencies easier. And I will give floor back to Thibaut, and we can proceed to the next panel. Thank you so much again, both of you.
All right, indeed. So not only the next, but the final panel of the day. As I announced already quite a few times, this is a first in the history of this conference cycle. First time that we welcome on the very same panel competition agencies, practitioners, and someone working for a company. Once again, we don't have any business relationship with any of those entities, so we've invited them because they have great expertise. So I can't wait for this panel, and then I will do a conclusion in about 10 minutes. We'll see what I can pull out in the meantime. And I'll give the floor to Maria, who is one of our great editors. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thibaut. I hope you're listening to me properly. Okay, so hello, everyone. I see everyone. I think I'm missing Sophia, but I'm just going to move on. So hello, everyone. I am Maria Manuela Palacio. I am a Colombian lawyer, currently JSD candidate at Stanford Law School and member of the Computational Antitrust Project. First thing I want to say is that we're so thankful and lucky to have all of you speak at this conference. Thank you for taking the time to prepare your remarks and be here today. Thank you for agreeing to share your experience and for educating curious people who want to learn from you. Second thing I will say is that this is a project and a conference that has been reaching a lot of people from across the world who are eager to contribute to the project of improving how markets and competition works, and particularly who want to actively contribute to the project of improving antitrust by innovating and being creative and being very forward-looking. And one way to do that is by implementing computational tools and developments into legal and economic analysis. So wherever they are in the world and whatever role they are occupying, whether they are part of the government, in a law firm, in a corporation, advocacy group, or in academia, the people this conference is reaching are already using computational tools as part of their job, or will be analyzing the implications of their use for decision-making or shaping markets, market dynamics, or will be even designing these tools themselves, as we saw earlier. So I am saying this because I would like the panelists to keep this in mind, to know that to flourish, this field requires a lot of effort in translating complex knowledge from one discipline to another. Please share with the audience those insights and experiences that you believe are fundamental to understanding what we mean by computational antitrust. How does it look in practice? How are computational tools and methods integrated in antitrust analysis and related procedures? What have you learned from those processes of integration, and what you ask others in a similar path to keep in mind? What have you realized about what these tools can actually do and what they cannot do, and why? How are these tools beneficial, and how they are improving the efficiency or the accuracy of antitrust analysis? Or maybe how they are complementing other types of analysis in antitrust. And of course, we would like you to share with us what you see as limitations and how these have been addressed, or how would you suggest they should be addressed. In answering to these questions, I would like the speakers to provide us with as much real and practical information as possible, information that we as audience can go back in the future and try to incorporate in our own work as learnings, and also that we can fully grasp how computational antitrust works in practice and what are the challenges we need to work on. The purpose of this call, and the reason I am taking a lot of time doing this, is to encourage you speakers and all of us participating in this conference to help with the understanding of computational logic and its practical application, so that in a way we can demystify it and then increase research development and adoption of these good tools across jurisdictions. So having said that, our speakers for this panel are terrific. When you read about their work, you can only be inspired and really curious about their exciting experience and what they have to say. For now, let me introduce them briefly and move on to the discussion. First, we have Winnie Ching. She's Legal Director at the Competition and Consumer Commission of Singapore. She's responsible for reviewing decisions, supervising investigations, assessing mergers, and providing advice on legal and policy matters. Christina Nordlander is partner at Allen & Overy, a leading EU antitrust litigation and regulatory practice with a particular focus on big tech and life sciences. She's founder of and runs Women's Competition Network, which is awesome. We have Asimakis Kominos. He's his partner at White & Case. His practice focuses on complex cases of abuse of dominance, restrictive agreements, and merger control reviews, and on newly adopted Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act. He represents clients before European courts, European Commission, national competition authorities, national courts, and international arbitration tribunals, which is also amazing. And we have Sofia Real. She's a senior competition counsel at Google. As a senior counsel in Google EMEA competition law team, she provides strategic advice to global business on all aspects of EU competition law, with a particular focus on the ACH region. So I am delighted to welcome our speakers. I'll divide the discussion in 4 blocks. First, a general question to all, and then I'll direct questions to each of you and ask for comments from the rest. So let's start by asking the entire panel about a fundamental question: the meaning of computational antitrust. So I like to start this panel, or discussions in general, always by testing assumptions on what we think we know and what we think that everyone knows. We are assuming that we all know what computational antitrust means, but I am curious as to how each of you are using the concept computational antitrust in your practice, and how has the use of this concept changed with time, and the more you update your knowledge and the more information we have available. So also, I'm curious to know, how are you learning and updating your knowledge on computational antitrust? So Christina, can you go first, please? Then Winnie, Sofia, and Asimakis. You each have more or less 5 minutes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So Maria, thank you for that brilliant introduction, and especially the shout out to the Women's Network, which I like. And it's a pleasure to be here and to be invited. This is a brilliant initiative, very much in favor of new thinking and being innovative to serve our clients. So very, very happy to be part of this discussion. I have to admit, the concept was kind of new to me. I mean, having now, taken a dive into it, I realize, of course, that what we're talking about is not new to me. I mean, I see it all around me, and have some experiences that I'll share. But the actual concept, which is why I suggested we start with that question on the panel, because I wasn't honestly sure exactly what was meant by computational antitrust. And maybe I'll kick off my answer. I had the pleasure of listening in on some of the discussions today and yesterday. And Susan Athey, of course, gave a brilliant keynote yesterday. The chief economist of the DOJ, who's a computer scientist, if I'm not mistaken. She said that a lot of what we're talking about is kind of conceptually doing the same old thing we've all been doing for a long time, but just using new tools and software to implement, what we're doing, because we're just dealing with enormous data sets. And I think, I don't know if others agree, but I think that's one way of looking at it. How are we using software and tech to kind of do a lot of things that we've always done, i.e., detect cartels, defend against cartel allegations, do large doc review, et cetera, but dealing with huge data sets and using machine learning and maybe automated decision-making tools to do that. So that's one way I think of maybe looking at the concepts. And I won't spend too long, but just looking a bit at what was discussed in previous panels and what I read in some of your brilliant kind of publications, I just note that we're talking about a huge set of different things, which is, can be interesting for our discussion. I mean, just a few examples that I've heard and picked up. I mean, a lot of it I think has to do with cartel detection and bid rigging detection, maybe in particular. I mean, there's some interesting projects by agencies to kind of collect data from local and central systems and again deal with large data sets to detect patterns in bids, which I think is interesting. There was something, I think this was Chile, where they look at concentration threshold, notification compliance, and cross shareholdings and potential gun jumping issues through automated tools, which I also thought was very interesting. The UK CMA in its report talks about machine learning to review documents and evidence, translation, which is kind of a fairly simple thing, but important. And of course, using as part of its merger intelligence unit, these kinds of tools to look at, potential mergers of concern that they want to pick up. So, a lot of different things. I've also seen ideas where you use, automated tools to look at, how do we interpret language concepts in the DMA, for example. What do we mean by self-preferencing? What do we mean by different concepts? Are they used differently in different places? I thought that was quite interesting. So anyway, I'll maybe leave it there, but it's, I think it's a lot of new tools, sophisticated tools to deal with large data sets, but in the end doing a lot of, again, conceptually the same things as we've always been doing in antitrust. And it seems to potentially mean a lot of different things. So I don't know if anyone has a more kind of defined, clear definition of what computational antitrust means, but that would be my comments to kick off the discussion.
Yeah,
well,
maybe. Yeah.
Well, let me echo the similar thoughts in relation to my understanding of computational antitrust. I think it does cover those processes in relation to how do you make things easier, how do you make things more efficient, and that really spans, if you like, the gamut of work that can occur, in terms of that pre-horizon scanning from a regulatory perspective, that horizon scanning, how do you, that detection. It also spans the actual investigation, how do you make that investigation easier? How do you, if you like, ingest such large amounts of data in speed that you would normally take you such a long period of time, such that you can actually shorten an investigative process. And then it also, I think, spans like that decision-making process. So in an administrative system where you are writing the decision, how you can use those tools to help with that writing, that, if you like, summarization of the data and also the evidence that is before you. So those tools, I think it is a sort of a tools based analysis. In respect of other areas, computational antitrust, I think it's also understanding the evidence that is before you, in all that you have, all that is being used to, if you like, put that lens to appreciate the conduct which you need to apply an analysis to. So it's all of those things from my perspective which spans, if you like, a life cycle of a case from a regulator. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. I think we will have a little bit more time to expand on your answers in a minute. And thank you very much for that. I think we can continue with Vasimakis and then with Sophia, and your general thoughts about what computational antitrust is.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Okay, very good. So, I mean, I am familiar, obviously, with the term computational antitrust, also because, you know, I'm a follower of Thibault. So Thibault has written quite a lot on these topics. Now, in terms of our kind of practical experience in dealing with these new issues, and not so new, actually, sometimes. First of all, I would like to make a distinction between, in terms of what we're talking about, I'd like to make a distinction between like computational tools as a kind of tools that we use for the practice of law. That's one area, for example, or competition law dealing with questions where these tools obviously are used. I mean, I will start from the second. Obviously, when dealing with major merger cases or even behavioral cases, we are quite familiar with these tools, especially when it comes to merger control, for example. Developed competition authorities use them quite a lot. Maybe the lawyers themselves will not be so much dealing with these issues. Probably our economists will be using these tools, and they will have a dialogue with the European Commission, for example, on sets of data, etc. But definitely they are used quite a lot. When it comes to cases, obviously we have been dealing with major cases where data played a major role. You know, I mean, I remember in the Google shopping case, the European Commission was always saying, "Oh, we have dealt with the X billion of whatever data on a particular topic to show a certain result, I mean, a certain outcome when it comes to a particular type of conduct." But so, you know, we deal with them every day. From a policy point of view, I think these tools, and in particular AI, are more interesting, let's say, in the area of agreements, of collusion, for example. I mean, when it comes to Article 101 in our European competition law, I think this is being discussed quite a lot. It's a major policy issue. It tests the boundaries of our law, for example. Where does human behavior stop? Where does conduct of undertaking stop? And where does AI start? And then what about some other rules that we have when it comes to Article 101, which is that you need to have an agreement. You need to have essentially a consensus built by at least two particular undertaking companies. So, you know, we have been discussing those questions quite a lot, and this is a tricky area, and I'm sure we will be led, obviously, by competition authorities and how they will be dealing with specific issues. We will see what when the first cases come. I mean, we have seen some cases where they raise certain issues, and the European Court of Justice even has given some first, let's say, I would say some first ideas as to how it is likely to be dealing with these issues, but we have never had a real case where the issue arose in its full colors, so to say. Now, when it comes to how we use these tools in private practice, personally, I'm doing mostly litigation. We don't use these tools a lot, obviously. You know, I mean, to the extent we are able to facilitate our lives in terms of case law research, etc., there is a gap there, and therefore I would welcome all initiatives I was hearing before the ending of the previous panel. I'm sure there is a business case to be made in terms of making our lawyers' lives easier in terms of navigating through the world of case law, etc. I always envy the European Commission's legal service, which is doing all these cases. So in my kind of mind, I think they have a huge computer and they press buttons and they say, oh, I need a case law on this particular point. They press the button, that the whole thing comes out, because they've been doing that forever, right? I mean, we are quite active as a law firm, and I'm sure Christina also, but you know, we can't say that we have been doing all cases of competition law, whereas the legal service can say that. So when we are able to press buttons and get results like that, I really look forward to that day.
Thank you very much for that. And again, we'll expand more on the application of legal tools in your practice later on. Sophia, can you please give us your comments?
Sure, happy to. And first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to be part of this panel. Really looking forward to today's discussion. And I think I can probably only reiterate what the others have already said. I must admit that, when I was first invited to this panel, I did look up at least how Thibault thinks about computational antitrust to know what I was getting myself into, because I have to say that at least how I thought about it was probably much more narrower than how you can define it. Because I always thought that computational antitrust essentially refers to, more sophisticated tools that I particularly use to detect things like, bid rigging, collusion, price fixing agreements, those sorts of things. And I think it was either Winnie or Christina who put it quite nicely, that it's really about doing the work that we've always been doing, trying to answer the same questions, but doing it in a more sophisticated way, using the technology that is already available, in a way that also, speeds up the work that we're doing, maybe makes it more effective. And I think what that also means is that, the tools that are already available, or the potential tools that exist, I mean, it's an incredibly broad range, and that are all trying to address different needs, trying to help respond to different questions, and that I think are also all open to very unique challenges, because I think the range of computational antitrust tools is just so broad. And yeah, I think as Marcus put it, it is about making lives easier. I think for the regulators, for the companies, or more specifically in-house counsel like myself, for the lawyers advising them, I think there's a huge potential to make things a lot easier. But I also think, there's still a lot of room to grow. And as Marcus was also saying, making these tools more widely available, having tools that fill gaps where currently these tools don't exist or don't exist as widely.
Having a little bit of issues with the internet, but I almost heard everything you said. And I would like to use something you said that about how computational tools are making our lives easier. So I would like to move on to the next part of the panel and ask Winnie, what are those tools that are making your life and your team's lives easier at the Commission in Singapore? And then I'll just ask some small follow-up questions to that. And these questions are, why did you choose those tools instead of other tools? And I am also curious about the particular tasks that you are automating with the antitrust legal analysis and other procedures that you're dealing with, like in investigations, in analyzing cases, in conducting and supervising investigations, and maybe in assessing mergers. Yes, please go on. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. I should say that this is from my own personal perspective as to how I think it helps in terms of our cases from my experience, and not my organisation's. So I think there are a couple of tools that we use, and their purposes and functions do differ. So I talked about that horizon scanning, the life cycle. So from the very outset, we have a bid rigging detection tool that we use. So I think that's possible because in Singapore, all public procurement is done through one portal. And this portal requires those who are bidding for a particular tender to fill out these standardized fields and then submit their tender bids. And in filling out those standardized fields, one of those fields is price. And in respect of this portal, it provides, if you like, a very rich data source. And you can see some, just from my description, that structured data. So in relation to our bid rigging detection tool, it uses quantitative indicators, which are related to common signs of bid rigging, given that there are certain patterns that can be associated with bid rigging. And these indicators measure central tendencies and dispersion of that bidding data. So that's one tool that we can use. And how does this work in practice? If you like, I mean, this database was always available, but it would mean that officers would have to go through vast quantities of data, pull it out into Excel sheets. Obviously, with this automation using the bid rigging detection tool, you can do that process much more quickly and efficiently. It also, you know, human error can occur, and so it, if you like, means that hopefully where it solves that issue. So that's just one tool. Another tool that we have is a document similarity tool. So as you know, with tender bids, you know, tenderers that are in collusion may very well use similar phrases, similar terms, and this document similarity tool allows us to detect the similarities between tender documents that are submitted. And again, this could be indicative of bid rigging. I mean, again, these are tools. It doesn't mean that there is bid rigging that is occurring. It just means that these are flags for us to perhaps take a closer look at. I mean, this tool was developed with the Singapore government, GovTech, Singapore government technology agencies, which has helped us in respect of this particular tool. The other tool that I mentioned was developed in-house by ourselves. I mentioned mergers, and and I go more to an administrative process. So we've got a DocGen tool. So as regulators and as parties would know, confidentiality is an important aspect of any information that we collect. Obviously, we have to ensure that confidential information isn't disclosed inadvertently to any party or the public in relation to our decisions. So when when we have a proposed infringement decision or an SO in EU terms, you've got a number of parties. Each party's claim confidentiality over their documentation, but you know, it could be correspondence between two parties, in which case it won't be confidential to those two parties because they were involved in that conversation, but it will be confidential in respect of other parties who may not have been aware of that conversation. And so this document generation tool allows us, if you like, on a master document to isolate which parts are confidential and which ones aren't. And then we can then, from that, using that tool, generate the different versions of the decision or proposed decision in a merger case, in a cartel case, in an abuse of dominance case, which we can then surface to the parties for representations or for the final public decision, depending on which stage we're at. So that's, if you like, one administrative saving in terms of time. One more tool, let me just mention quickly, is our online mergers filing portal. So again, we've as a push in terms of digitalization, which spans our work and is a critical plank of what we're looking at to do in-house, is for mergers that used to be filed like sort of like a portal through email, and people would email their submissions in. This portal has set fields. Those fields need to be filled out then a link is provided where more detailed submissions which are not standardized are uploaded. But this means that we can, using automated bots, take the information that is filed and bring it in-house into our own systems, in which case we can do data analytics around that, how many sole applications, how many joint applications, in which jurisdictions, are these international mergers, are these domestic mergers, and also, who are the key parties, so that eventually we may be able to automate, sending out of letters to third parties that are nominated in the forms that are filled out, in the key fields that are filled out. So they're just some, if you like, a quick snapshot of some of the tools that we've used. I mean, we also have an e-statement tool that's in progress, and a complaints management tool in progress as well. But they are, if you like, yet to be launched, but something that we are working on right now. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. I don't know if you can listen to me. I think it's again breaking.
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. I wanted to follow up and ask if you have been engaging in cooperation efforts with other antitrust agencies, and if you have been sharing these tools. But I'm just gonna let you answer to that question in the end, because I know we have time constraints, and I'm gonna ask Christina, Simakis, and Sophia just in 2 minutes of their opinion. What tools have you been using in your work? And what have you found to be the right task in antitrust for technology to jump in? I hope you listened to that. You heard that.
Shall I kick off again, Maria? Or
Yes,
okay.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, I think the first thing I need to do is to get together with Makis and find that secret machine in the legal service, because then we're going to have a killer product that all our clients will love. I agree. I don't have faith that that their cases have been, or their case experiences have been automated, but it's a good idea. No, jokes aside. So maybe quickly 3 areas where we kind of use these kinds of tools with clients. I mean, one very obvious one, of course, is large doc review in kind of defending investigations and the mergers in the various different contexts. I mean, we're as Winnie and other regulators are, we're dealing with enormous amounts of production of documents and emails and all sorts of communications, and it's it's a new world that's sometimes quite challenging, and we have various tools to do that in-house and external. And maybe just a few comments more from a kind of law firm perspective, working with clients. I mean, one thing, of course, we have to kind of balance the need to obviously make full disclosure with the risk of kind of making errors or omissions when we use various technical tools. And maybe a couple of comments. I mean, one comment, I think, Maureen, some of your questions, you were kind of saying, how do you use this if clients use these tools? I mean, one comment I would make from my experience, in particular in the EU, is that we often work very closely with clients, and one reason for that actually is legal privilege, to be honest. A lot of this is very sensitive, and in the EU, in-house counsel don't have legal privilege, and so we it's not that the clients kind of give us the results of their searches, or that we just use tools, but we work very closely with clients in these kinds of discovery and document production projects, and there are various challenges, including how do you secure, if you use these tools and various automated decision making, how do you secure kind of an audit trail? How do you know exactly what's been produced and what's not been produced when you're not kind of reviewing things manually? That's sometimes a challenge. And I think one thing that I've seen, which again is something we've always done. I mean, in the past, when we were dealing with more simple discovery, we kind of negotiate with the European Commission, DG COM, for example, on who are the what do you call it, the relevant people in the company, in the client, who what are the relevant search terms. We've always had those kinds of negotiations and discussions with when we're responding to, for example, Commission RFIs. But I think those kinds of things in this new world are more complicated, and going back to securing the audit trail, I think one maybe good practice is to really make sure that you have conversations with the regulator. What exactly are you doing? How exactly are your tools working? What exactly are you producing, not producing? And what exactly are the search terms or the relevant, criteria? Because that, I think, might reduce the risk of potentially, getting into trouble for having, omitted something. So I think we just need to understand, part of our challenge as law firm lawyers is to really understand what are we doing and how does this all work, to be able to make sure we try to protect our clients as best we can. If we miss something or something goes wrong in those kinds of, large discovery or document production exercises. And one point that is maybe interesting, I think we're in a very different position from the regulator. I mean, Winnie and other regulators, if they're using tools to discover evidence of potential cartel or bid rigging or illegal behavior, if they miss something is not the same risk, because you're looking for evidence, right? But for us, if we defend and miss something, we can get our clients into serious trouble. So I think maybe there's a different dynamic. We have to be very careful about, again, explaining exactly what we're doing and how we're using the tools, and trying to protect ourselves, against any risks with the regulators. Maybe quickly, another area that I've seen the use of kind of automated tools is, of course, compliance. And I won't go into too much detail because of time constraints, but different clients, of course, have different compliance tools and programs, and a lot of that these days is online. You can have different prompts, you can have different tools that review, for example, in financial services and banking, communications. You can review large sets of communications and have flags for different kind of antitrust risk indicators. So that, I think, is an interesting area. Make sure you design questionnaires. Those can be linked to certain business processes or prompts. And identifying different areas of risks that can somehow be automated in terms of flags, compliance flags. And then maybe thirdly and finally, another interesting area, I think, is remedies. And being someone who works a lot with kind of in the tech world and big tech platforms, etc., those kinds of investigations. I mean, I think that's fascinating. I mean, how do we design remedies? How do we convince regulators that whatever remedies we're proposing are effective and efficient? For example, if we're looking at choice screens or consumer choice architecture, and how to design whatever different marketplaces or rankings or web pages or search tools. I mean, it's very interesting, because as we all know, and I've heard Susan Athey and others speak brilliantly to this. Regulators are becoming increasingly sophisticated in terms of understanding that consumers don't just easily click or easily go to the third page of the search results necessarily. So understanding consumer behavior and behavioral economics, understanding computer science, data science, and trying to then, in our role, show what is an efficient remedy, what has the desired effect, how do consumers behave in the online world in particular. And this links interestingly to the new regs that we're now seeing, the DMA, for example, in the EU, where you talk about effective compliance, in terms of various practices that are covered by that regulation. And how do you show that? I think a lot of it will have to do with these kinds of areas, showing that consumers will it will be effective in terms of consumer behavior or online product design or choice. Anyway, I'll maybe leave it there, but it's a lot of interesting areas where tools are relevant in our private practice with clients.
And I'm gonna pick up exactly what you just said, and ask Makis just briefly, and then move on to Sophia, because I have a very interesting question I'm very curious to ask you about. Makis, how does agency use of computational tools change your work as private practitioners? Just to follow up on what Christina just said.
Well, I mean, I would say they make our lives more difficult, but that's not the correct answer, the politically correct answer. No, I mean, to be fair, we want the competition authorities to be very much modern when it comes to the way they work. These tools are very important, because essentially they allow the competition authorities to work better through the facts. This is what, at the end of the day, a competition lawyer wants, the competition authority to take proper account of the facts of a particular case. So everything they do there, is welcome. And in fact, if you see now in the competition authorities, certainly the European Commission, there's, if you go to the organigram, it's a word we use to look at the way the authority is structured internally, you will see that a very senior position is called the Chief Technology Officer. For example, the European Commission, the DG Competition, has a Chief Technology Officer. Currently, the position is vacant, but soon there will be somebody filling it in. So, and other authorities, other agencies to have this kind of Chief Technology Officer. So this is something definitely that is very much adopted by competition authorities, and we are looking to these developments with a lot of interest. Now, from what Winnie was explaining, for me, the important point in history will be when these kinds of assessments become a proof in themselves. Because from what I see, I can see technology being a tool in terms of uncovering evidence or systematizing evidence, etc. But the evidence to build a case, the tool cannot give you that evidence. The tool itself cannot be the evidence, right? You cannot go to court and say, AI has told me, and it has to be true because it's unmistaken in this particular case. There's no error. AI is telling me that there is a cartel here, or that there is collusion, for example. There's a concerted practice. That cannot stand in court. So when when we cross that bridge, then of course we would be in a totally different and new world. When these types of tools will be used as evidence in themselves.
Thank you. That's a very provocative thought. I would love to give time to Winnie to answer and to respond to that. But I'm going to go to Sophia and ask her a question about how is Google's legal team using Google's APIs and technological developments? And how are you integrating them into your legal analysis? I think it's very interesting that you are right there in the middle of technological breakthroughs. And I think we all want to know if you're taking advantage of all of that technological advancement in your legal analysis and how you're doing that. And then we'll go back if we have time.
It's a very good question. And I think it's safe to say we probably could be using these tools more. Because I think like anybody who looks at these tools and anybody who works in competition law, I think is aware of the various challenges. I think Marcus was just touching on the fact that, you still need humans to sort of, I think that's what he was getting at, that you still need humans to sort of evaluate what the tools spit out. The tool itself is, not yet the evidence or not yet the answer. I think Winnie was touching upon the fact that, data availability is a challenge. And I think as a company, we're not immune to these challenges. I think we are, maybe somewhat uniquely placed because we have access to a lot of tools, and maybe we're more prepared to develop these tools. But as I also said in the beginning, I think the range of tools that are available or that could exist is impressive. But it also means that you just have a lot of sort of different questions that you're trying to answer that require bespoke tools. And so, to respond to your question more directly, I think we're probably not using these tools as much as we maybe could. But just to give a few examples, and this might be pushing the boundaries of the definition of computational antitrust tools somewhat, but at the very basic and the really not very sophisticated tools, we have on the one hand a repository where we upload our submissions to regulators. And the purpose of that tool is really to help us respond to future RFIs, to make that work quicker, more efficient, to ensure consistency. But it also allows us, to search the tool, to see where we're seeing trends, regulators in different fields asking about the same products, asking the same types of questions. So that's really helpful in terms of analysis and sort of sharing insights internally as well. Then secondly, we have a tool, and again, it's not super sophisticated, but it does save us a lot of time, that helps us automate part of the RFI response process and actually automating sending out emails to internal folks. Because I think what we saw a few years ago was just RFIs getting increasingly lengthy and increasingly complex in terms of the number of products they cover, the sheer number of questions in an RFI. And so as in-house counsel, we found ourselves just having to write, sometimes hundreds of emails, just following up with folks internally. And, then you're not liaising with the right person because somebody has moved on, they've changed position, and then you have to do the same thing again with somebody else. And then you have to chase for input. And so with one of the law firms we work with, we came up with a tool that actually automated part of that process. And so it's probably not what you think about when you think about computational antitrust, but I think it still fits the definition because it saves us a lot of time. Because I think that is also one of the purposes of computational antitrust tools to some degree, right? That it can automate things that can be automated. And so that you can then focus on the work that cannot yet be automated, or where you haven't yet found a solution for how to automate it. I think at the other end of the spectrum, and Christina was touching upon that, is, we do have tools that help us implement our remedies. And to some degree, these tools are based on existing frameworks we already have and based on existing software. I think we're very lucky in that regard. But again, I think one of the limitations is that these are very bespoke tools, uniquely developed for one specific case to address one specific problem. So the next time you're looking at a new case, you sort of, have to come up with a new tool that helps you implement the remedy for that case.
Thank you for that. I think we're almost reaching the end of the panel, and I just want to ask each of you in 2 minutes if you can give us some final thoughts, and also quickly ask how you are keeping up with technological developments and how you're planning to incorporate that into your practice. Christina, we can start with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. I mean, maybe one point to make is that we as law firms, and Sophia just mentioned an example. I mean, we as law firms are also developing these tools. I mean, A&O is very much at the forefront of AI. I mean, we have our own lovely Harvey, which is our own internal kind of AI tool, which is kind of increasingly used in various interesting ways. I've asked it to do various presentations and kind of short kind of summary memos, whatever, or case law research. I mean, I have to say though, I very much agree with Marcus's point and point others have made. You still need the experts, you still need the lawyers. I mean, we've all read these examples of litigation legal briefs with made up case law. I mean, I for example recently asked it, can you do a short speech for me on the DMA, and part of it clearly was referring to the DSA. So I mean, it's obviously not perfect, but I think as a way of getting a first product, as a way of getting some ideas, as a way of dealing with some kind of contractual clauses and standard contracts and various versions of buyer-friendly, seller-friendly. I mean, there are lots of very useful applications, and we're very much investing in AI also as a firm. Maybe a second point, and this is the question you asked, Marcus. I mean, I do think both in terms of investing in tools and trying to learn to use those tools in an intelligent way that benefits us and our clients. I do think also we as lawyers have a new challenge in trying to, be interdisciplinary. I mean, it used to be that we needed to understand economics as antitrust lawyers, and that's part of what I've always loved with this area of practice. But I do think now we need to kind of also try to understand computer and data scientists, and we hear all the agencies recruiting new kinds of expertise. I think the question was asked yesterday, could a competition agency ever be led by a computer scientist, and why not? So I do think we're challenged, but by needing to understand kind of new areas of expertise. And I think it kind of adds, I don't know if Marcus agrees with this, but I think it adds a bit of a new layer to our job, because we don't only need to kind of review the evidence and the data and the whatever communications and kind of apply the legal test to the evidence, but I think we also need to understand a little bit these tools, as I was mentioning earlier. I mean, how has the automated decision making happened? What criteria were used? What selection? terms, whatever, because we also need to, defend in terms of, is there bias there? Is there something that disadvantages our client? Is there something that gives the agency the wrong, result in terms of evidence of illegal behavior? So I won't go on for too long, but I think there's a kind of an additional layer of being able to understand the tools and understand, what we might need to argue and advocate to agencies on behalf of our clients if those tools aren't, providing the right results. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic discussion.
So I'll just give you the floor, Winnie, but to all of you, if you've ever been to Palo Alto, you would think in the Silicon Valley, the internet connection is excellent. And you will know that every hours or two, you are actually losing internet for a couple of minutes, which killed me the first time I discovered the fact. Anyway, Maria is probably locked outside of the network, but Winnie, I'm actually also curious. She referred back to you quite a few times to hear your thoughts on what you heard on the panel.
So I think what, in terms of looking forward, what we are doing, we've just set up a new data and digital division within the organization, pulling, if you like, officers from other divisions to that new division, as well as recruiting a data scientist or a data engineer to assist us with our work in this area. And so also there is a number of sort of training programs that we're encouraging officers to go on to ensure that we are, if you like, kept up to speed and learn the language in relation to data, as well as how we can operationalize more effectively our tools to help our work. And so that's, if you like, on the sort of technical internal side. In response to some of the sort of queries, I think one query was related to other agencies. To what extent do we speak to other agencies? I think there's a lot of dialogue that's going on at the moment in respect of this area at forums like the ICN, at side meetings, and also in respect of capacity building. So there is a lot of dialogue, and I think we're keen to learn from other regulators what they're doing and see how what they're doing may translate to your own jurisdiction, given, you have to have a primary source, like, for us, we have that public procurement portal. I think another question, and then just briefly, was how do you, or do you always need a human, if you like, associated with that analysis? And yes, I mean, certainly in relation to evaluating that evidence and coming to the conclusion as to whether the conduct is or is not anti-competitive requires a degree of judgment. I think where I spoke in respect of, evidence review is that sometimes the conduct may actually be facilitated by an algorithm, by computational tools for the conduct itself. And I think it's there that, it may be helpful, or we may see other tools being used to, if you like, understand those tools, or to get explanations from a company as to how they're using those tools. And because what we will see is the results of the use of the tools, and then we want to understand how those tools operate, and then, if you like, to evaluate or give some context to the conduct that or the outcome that we see following it. So that was my comment about, ensuring that we have an appropriate lens, and that appropriate lens may need us to be more proficient in respect of algorithms or other tools that look at the data or computational aspects. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Somehow I would have loved for you to say, well, we have full intention of going entirely computational and get rid of all of the employees. The computers can do it all. But of course, this is not reality. And to some degree, we shouldn't hope for such reality. So thank you for the explanation. Makis, the floor is yours for some concluding remarks.
Yeah, just very quickly, I mean, on whether we need people with which are conversant when it comes to computational tools? Absolutely. I mean, up until a couple of months ago, I was also responsible for our recruitment, for example. So I would definitely look with a lot of interest, at the CVs when there was this kind of, oh, I have studied also computer science, and so definitely I was quite interested in those multidisciplinary, let's say, CVs. I wanted also to share my own experience. I have been working in this area for 20 years. I mean, the first case I was involved 20 years ago was the Microsoft case, the first Microsoft case before the European Commission. The Microsoft case, and in fact, the decision of the Commission owes a lot to one particular person in the Commission's legal team. And now time has passed, we can give names. His name is Jean Ubu. He was a French guy on secondment from France. If you ask me from the other side, which was the most critical, let's say, part of the team of the Commission back then, it was Jean Ubu. That's clear. Why? Because he was an expert in computer science and economics. He was not a lawyer, not a pure IO economist, but he was somebody that could really understand the facts well, and he could translate also the facts, because to understand the facts is one thing, but you need to have the other foot, let's say, on the other side, and you can translate the facts to lawyers and economists. So this is very important. And how I keep in touch with technological developments? Well, I mean, I'm based in Brussels, and the agencies that I work with, they tend to be like the first to shoot when it comes to this type of new phenomena. You're all aware with the Brussels effect. I mean, certainly the European legislator is very active when it comes to this area. I mean, only a couple of days ago, we had a political agreement on the Artificial Intelligence Act, and there will be some enforcement powers also with the European Commission. So, we have the authorities here are quite active, so we have to keep track with everything that happens in this area. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
To some degree, I don't know if you saw that, but the French President Macron announced that he wasn't too pleased with the act. So might it be the end of the Brussels effect? We'll see. But Sophia, the floor is yours for some concluding remarks.
Yeah, I guess I have to agree with Marcus that you have no choice but to keep up to date with all of these developments. But I do think it's a really exciting area. I think some of the challenges we touched upon today, they will not go away anytime soon. Access to data, access to also, high quality data, and having the right tools to actually work with that, but also having humans involved in evaluating that. I think all of that will not go away, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity to use more of these tools. And I'm really interested to see, what additional developments we'll see over the coming years, because I do believe that it has the potential to make lives easier for regulators, for lawyers, for in-house counsel. So I think it's a really exciting space.
All right. Yeah. On that note, thank you so much. I think it was a great addition to the conference. You added a lot of talking points that we did not even touch upon in the last couple of days. So thank you all so very much. I would just take 2 minutes to conclude. I'm told already that we've reached the end of those 2 days. It goes fast. I tried my best to summarize the first day of the conference in my introduction today. So let me try to summarize the second day. If you were not with us earlier today, Glenn and Zoe gave a very inspiring keynote on a whole new kind of remedy that agencies could consider to force new governance structures. We then explored the findings of researchers using computational tools, namely tools to detect whether or not the European Commission is protectionist, tools to detect collusion through abnormal market behaviors, and tools to tackle killer acquisitions. Natalie and Daniel gave a demo on what they are developing and what their companies are pushing in the space, not to replace antitrust lawyers, but to help and augment those antitrust lawyers and experts. And the very last panel of the day looked at computational antitrust from a 360 degrees. Now, the last time that I tried a 360 was while skiing, and I can tell you it did not end as well as this panel whose transcript will be a gold mine. So the question now is, where do we go from there? And I guess there are, for me, two ways to answer the question. First, I can be very practical. I could tell you that we have presented you in those last 2 days with several papers that we will be publishing very soon on our website, computationalantitrust.com. We will continue to publish papers next year. We will publish an open access database with all the computational tools that are relevant to competition lawyers, something we've been working on in the last couple of weeks. We will also publish a new annual report in which we ask contribution from competition agencies. Last year, we had 26 competition agencies explaining what they do in the space, and we have the intention of publishing another of those reports and to organize a conference around the report, hopefully at the OECD or elsewhere. We also want to expand on our podcasts with many more episodes coming your way on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on and so forth. And of course, we'll be back with an annual conference. Now, and I will finish there. There is, for me, a second way to answer the question as to what are the next steps. From, shall we say, a more substantive point of view, the way I see it, we do not need anymore to focus all of our efforts on convincing that computational tools can be helpful. The point has been made. We received numerous requests from agencies to guide them in the fields. In fact, we have 66 competition agencies in the project. And just last year, we had discussions, I counted them, with over 50 of those competition agencies. So now I think that we need to go in two directions. One, we need to keep on working and documenting what computational antitrust can do from a technical point of view. Two, we need to start drafting clear legal rules that address the technical limitations of those tools, such as discrimination, the limits in the ability to predict what's going on in the market, and so on. And we will do just that. As the late Charlie Munger once said, show me the incentives, and I'll show you the results. Now, I think it's fair to say that the incentives to use computational tools are enormous, and as a result, computational antitrust flourishes. The incentive, on the other hand, to provide a clear legal framework are, shall we say, less strong. So I suggest that we increase those incentives. One way to do that is to foster transparency, and importantly, very importantly, to reward the most transparent institutions, companies, law firms, etc. So in 2024, we are going to focus on transparency in the context of computational antitrust. Once more, be sure to follow us on social media and to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. It warms my heart and the hearts of the entire team who have put a tremendous effort in organizing this conference and in running the project to see you all in this room today. So thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too. Bye-bye.